Sorry if anybody's watching that from the top. I just needed to check and see and make sure that the links and everything I was doing in the description are working. So, looks like we're all good to go on that count. All good to go on that count. Now we're just going to wait for some people to show on up. We are going to be playing... Oh, what am I doing? What am I doing? I'm messing everything up. Messing everything. Messing everything up. Messing everything up. Not doing it right. 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 Okay. What am I doing? What am I doing? What am I doing? What am I doing? Right. I remember what I'm doing. I'm going to watch a Chris Hedges speech. There was a specific one I had in mind. I don't remember where I put it. I don't remember where I put it. I don't remember. I watch Robot Chicken. You bet I do. You bet I do. Come on now. Why is this different than it used to be? History, but there's also like a watched later or a liked section. There it is.
At Trios, we believe that when one door closes, another one is opening. Whether you've been thrown a curveball by the pandemic, or you're giving it all to a job that just doesn't love you back, our front door is always open. Enroll today at Trios.com.
Always open. Come sell yourself to us. We're the ones that matter. Certainly it's not the system of capital that's abandoned you. Certainly not. Oh, it's giving me a warning. Please check the video resolution. No, that'll go away. That will go away. It's saying I have a viewer, very silent, quiet viewer. Well, and this is what I like to do while I wait for people to kind of pop on in. Just play a little Slither. Garlic. I like the name Garlic. Waiting for people to come in. Waiting. Maybe I shouldn't play a game of Slither. Maybe I should actually just start from the top. Because I assume someone's going to watch this, right? From the beginning. Even though it's a total disaster show. Right off the top. Am I out of order, or is the society? 80% of autistic people are unemployed, yet most are highly intelligent, compassionate, and decent individuals who could just use some basic inclusion. Disabled is a code word used to label groups that capitalism refuses to accommodate. I think there is something to this. Like, capitalism rejects able-bodied people, right? People that are considered able-bodied. Like, it causes problems for people who don't have autism or any kind of disorder or any kind of disability or anything like that, right? It causes problems for all of those sorts of people. So, of course, if you get labeled with that disability label, capitalism's going to do everything it can to just sort of put you out to pasture, right? And and it's going to get more obvious that that's what it's doing. Like, I remember when I was growing up, Walmart would always take a person who had like a significant mental illness and put them at the front as a greeter, right? And just like they're standing there greeting people like, hey, how you doing? And it's like as cynical a decision as a corporation can make, right? And of course, like, as soon as a labor crunch happened, who were the first people to go, right? Those people aren't greeters at the front door of Walmarts anymore, right? They're gone. And as soon as the populace is like, just like, they forget about it, then it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. When you brag about how free and democratic you are, but label opposing political ideologies as terrorist groups, and endlessly remove the democracy of other countries. Yeah. I feel this to my core, right? Like, far-right people, especially fascists, but capitalists generally, like, they have absolutely no problem about labeling communists as terrorist organizations and things like this. And it's like, okay, like, capitalism is currently engaged in 2 genocides, but yeah, the problem is communism, really. CRB, help, please unconfuse me. Yeah, like, the CRB was designed to be confusing, right? The CERB was not confusing, and that was its problem. That's why it needed to be changed, right? That the CERB was very straightforward, right? Everybody got it. Not everybody, obviously. If you're homeless, you're completely rejected from this society. But the CRB, right? The CRB is confusing as heck. Like, who gets it? How many hours are you allowed to work before you lose it? Right? Like, all of these kinds of things. And it's designed to be that way because the liberals want less and less people to use it over time. And they want to dump people out of it and sell people back to capitalism. That's what they want, right? That in retrospect, like what the liberals will say to each other in retrospect is that passing the CERB was a mistake, that it was an error, right? That they should have put in tighter supports to abandon people more readily when they needed to abandon people, right? And if the liberals had to put in the CERB and then started using that as a way to move towards a basic income, I would have respected it. But they very clearly just panicked, put the CERB in because they didn't know what else to do, which of course they got admonished immediately by the conservatives for doing so. And the liberals obviously have agreed with that because they've done everything they can to sort of dismantle that system. And then trickle people out into homelessness, right? They can't just cut it off and then have like this huge group of people dump into homelessness. It needs to be like a trickling effect. It needs to trickle people into homelessness. So, I got a funny story about this fella here, actually. I'm gonna mess his name up. Carl Witterquist? Yeah. So I met this fellow once at a basic income rally, or like a convention, right? And that was out in Manitoba. And then I flew back home to Toronto, right? And then me and my girlfriend at the time drove from there to Thunder Bay to go to Sleeping Giant. Hi, Ruth. How you doing? No, you're right on time, Ruth. You're just like a wizard, right? A wizard arrives precisely when he means to. So here you are. And so this fellow here, Carl, right? We meet in Manitoba. I fly back to Toronto, and then I drive to Thunder Bay to Sleeping Giant National Park, where me and my girlfriend do a huge hike. Like one day we hiked like 32 kilometers in a single day, and right at the end of that 32 kilometer hike, who shows up but Carl? He had driven So while I flew and then drove back to Thunder Bay, he was driving from Manitoba and then stopped at Sleeping Giant. And so we met in Sleeping Giant. We didn't really talk much. I was exhausted. But what a moment. What a moment. Oh, goodness. I'm just waiting to see how many people show up here, Ruth, and if... I'm going to show a Chris Hedges speech if we get enough people in. If not, we can just sort of have a chat. I'm down. When exactly will we stop doing UBI experiments and start caring about how it should be implemented? Yeah, like what we've got the data. We've got the data. We've got the data. Like we've got it. I saw something recently where it was either the former or the current vice president of Scotiabank outright saying, like, yeah, basic income's good for the economy. We should pass one, right? And he said really great things, like the basic income movement should stop being concerned about answering the question of affordability, with people saying, like, how are you going to pay for that? Like, we don't say that for lots of infrastructure projects. Like, we don't ask, how are you going to pay for that when you're building a railroad, right? We don't say, how are you going to pay for that when we're building transit systems and things like this. We assume that it's good to have a transit system. We assume that there's a social benefit to having these things in place. And the question of how you're going to pay for that, well, like, it's sort of silly to think about, like, the government can pay for that, right? Like, that's the purpose of a government. Like, and the idea that a government couldn't is very strange, right? Like, especially if we have the resources. Like, usually what holds government back isn't the idea of, like, how is the government going to, you know, create money and give it to people. Like, obviously, and any government can do that. But the issue is their access to resources, right? And we live in Canada. We have access to resources. So it's very, very silly to think about, like, how are you going to pay for that? What are you even talking about? Yeah, exactly. And that's a big thing that comes around all the time. Like, we don't ask how we're going to pay for that when major corporations get free money. Like, it's as if it is because of this brainwashing that has happened and is still held onto by the right, by the conservatives, that if you give money to corporations, they'll use it, right? They still believe that in the face of all evidence, but we are talking about people who deny the existence of climate change, right? So if you're gonna deny the existence of climate change, there's no grift that you won't fall for, right? Like, you are a rube if you're still talking that way, which is like the largest issue that we are facing as a people. It's just that there's these unbelievable gullible rubes. Like, oh, do they? What do they use it on? Near as I can tell, they just put it into offshore accounts and sit on it. The pandemic has taught us a few things. The workers on the bottom are who truly generates wealth. Yep, the complete destruction of trickle-down economics. It's a total farce. It's a fraud. We have the power to change the status quo when we unite together. That's true. And the world can accomplish amazing things when we work towards a common goal. Remember this after COVID is over. I actually think that this summer is going to be wild. I think this is going to be a summer of protest. Like, I just don't think people are going to tolerate being treated this way any longer, right? And these capitalists, like, they've made it very clear that they're going to abandon us, right? They've made that it's extremely obvious that they're going to abandon us as soon as it's beneficial for them. Like, they don't care if we die or not. Like, they don't care at all. Ah, some beautiful fireworks out on Woodbine Beach. Yeah, it's the May long weekend. 'Tis the beginning of the beautiful weather. Oh, if you can get out and enjoy it. Yeah, this summer is going to be troublesome to anyone, period. Like, it's going to be, I can already tell. Like, especially as soon as the vaccinations take hold to any degree whatsoever. Like, and especially like the medical community. I think about the medical community all the time, right? Like the medical community is going to just go nuts. Like, and I think many of them are probably going to try to seize power politically, and we should let them. Honestly, I'll vote. I will vote for any doctor. I will vote for any nurse immediately. Got microchip today. Get your effing vaccines. Get back to life. Yep. Yeah, the Thames River. I'm glad that even in the midst of like political ridiculousness and uncertainty, there are still people who are just sharing nice natural photos of Ontario. Beautiful Ontario. A lot of them will quit. I think you're absolutely right about that, Ruth. I think there will be like a mass exodus. Well, because like, imagine how frustrating it must have been to be a medical professional negotiating with these fucking nutjob sociopaths who got elected. Like, the level of a band, like, I'm just a retailer, right? I just worked in retail, and I'm telling you straight out that I got abandoned, right? Lots of people got abandoned, right? Everybody got abandoned, but like there are people who are working in like grocery stores, and they got fucking abandoned, totally abandoned, right? They just got told like, well, keep working, put on this mask, here's this plastic shield, I guess, you know. They didn't get any pay raises, they didn't get any time off. There was nothing that was done. Like, there was no like mass hiring drive to like give people reduced hours. There was nothing happened, right? They were literally just told, keep working for the same pay. But now imagine that, except you're dealing with like the people who have contracted this virus. And then on top of that, the Ford administration is cutting their funding, right? So it's just like an abomination on an abomination, right? Like and so like I'm working in this profession where this kind of stuff can happen, and my leadership is literally going to abandon me to it? No. The point that, yeah, the government says anyone is lazy this year. It's coming. All of that narrative is coming, man. They're going to say anything they can, and they're going to do everything they can to badger, belittle, and insult people to go back to work for capitalists, right? That's exactly what it's going to come down to. That they're going to assault any kind of support system, anything that's been put in place. And again, I'll say it as clearly as I can. If the NDP do not come out swinging hard on a basic income, then Jagmeet Singh has been bought. He's a capitalist, and he's just been bought by the capitalists. And the primary goal of the NDP from that point forward will be the removal and replacement of Jagmeet Singh, because that's a total betrayal of the populace. Like, Justin Trudeau has showed that he has no interest in any kind of long-term change to the system that will benefit the populace, right? Like, he's shown that very clearly as far as I'm concerned. Like, he's put in these measures over the pandemic, but he's called them temporary. Like, he knows, like, the game is to sell us back to capitalists, right? And Jagmeet Singh's job in this must be to push forward on a basic income, and if he doesn't, he's been completely bought. And so we need to we need to make it that explicit. We need to make it that clear when we're talking about the NDP, that our expectation is that they will be pushing on a basic income, and if they don't, then we don't trust them. There's no work. Yeah, I know a lot of people who would work if they could afford to. Well, and a lot of those jobs are not going to come back, right? Like, a lot of that stuff's not coming back. And, like, you see what's happening throughout the United States. Like, lots of people are just, like, they were one paycheck away from insolvency before the pandemic. The pandemic hit. They got abandoned, right? They missed that paycheck. So what do you think happened, right? They went insolvent, right? They got abandoned. They left. And so now the only people who are left in the neighborhood, right, are people who are looking at that job that's being offered by like a restaurant for like $7.50 an hour, and they're being like, no thank you, not interested, raise your wages. And what's the response from the media? People are just lazy. There's too many benefits, right? Even in the States. Like, imagine that. There's too many benefits in the United States where they basically got abandoned wholesale. Like, geez Louise. Geez Louise. Yep, restaurant workers say they won't return to work without a living wage. Yeah. And why should they? Like, honestly, just like we should be having mass strikes. We should be shutting this place down. There's no reason to participate in this system of capital, right? We should be doing exactly the opposite. Like, capitalism is a system that destroys itself. We don't need to participate. That's a weird... Why Starmer should follow Drakeford on universal basic income. That's a very, like, hoity-toity sort of... from the UK. Why Starmer should follow Drakeford on universal basic income? It's at the point that you can feel the revolution. Again, like, we'll definitely see what the summer brings. It's very difficult for me to believe, especially like I'm a person who has witnessed the anti-lockdown protests. There's a lot of built-up frustration. There's a lot of built-up angst. And like there's a lot of people who are like, they're working from home and they want to keep it that way, right? They want to keep it that way. They don't want to have to start coming back into like commuting 2 hours a day to do the job that they're doing at home. Like, no, it's stupid. Milo is home? Milo is actually over at my ex's. We trade him back and forth. So he's not here at the moment. I know. I miss him too. But... oh yes, Ben Shapiro says he's okay with civilian casualties. It's an article he published in 2002, mind you. So that's 18 years away, ago. 18 years plus. But, like, that's Ben Shapiro for you. Like, the guy is a sociopath. Like, he's, these sorts of articles, like, this is actually a crime, what he's done here, right? Like, calling for a war crime is a war crime. Alberta orders universities to pause partnerships with links to Chinese government. This is just like neo-McCarthyism is what it is. Like, and a stupid thing to do. Like a really stupid thing to do. Like, I wonder if they get into anything specific. Story, blah blah, advance, send a letter, yeah. I just wonder what they are researching in. Like, what's the subject matter? And this riff right here, they'll say, what is it? I'm deeply concerned about the potential theft of Canadian intellectual property. Okay, so this right here is extremely manipulative because we have an agreement with China. Okay, the agreement is very simple. They build all our stuff, right? The manufacturing is in China. They build all our stuff, and in return, they get access to the intellectual property. Okay? That's the deal. And so this kind of statement is extremely manipulative and extremely misleading, or extremely ignorant, because they are accusing China of the potential theft of intellectual property that China already has access to because of how our trade deals work with China. Like, so it's just McCarthyism. It's just a way to split things up and pretend as though China is this big villain in the world while we, sell weapons to 2 genocides. Canada now leads the world in daily doses delivered, matching the peak of U.S. vaccinations in April. Rad. Yeah. Rad. The vaccination's going to quickly change the discourse. People are going to very quickly, like, sweet, we all got vaccinated. The numbers are down. Let's go party, right? Like, it's over. Like, the populace is going to just declare this thing over pretty readily. And it's going to take a firm hand, should it need to come back, to bring it back. Look at this. Look at this beautiful weather. Oh, my goodness. Oh, yeah. Put that on a loop, man. Don't make me replay it. This is a cool shot right here. A guy holding the line with a homemade shield against an armored water cannon truck during the current riots in Colombia. Boom. End of the month spike will happen. Why do you think there's going to be an end of the month spike? Because of the long weekend? That makes the most sense to me. Like everybody just kind of going out and kind of partying willy-nilly. Yeah. Thank you for your sacrifice. 70 years without Nazis was really nice. Yeah. More or less my opinion. People are out there hoarding hand sanitizer. They're driving the prices up because they're buying all of it. Now they're reselling it for higher and higher prices and making huge profits. Some of them are charging ridiculous prices just to let other people use it. So now there are people who can't afford it, even if some is available, because it costs so much. People are getting sick and dying because they don't have any. Oh wait, did I say hand sanitizer? Housing. I meant housing. Damn autocorrect. Yeah. Yeah, we will see. Like, I mean, the vaccine has shown that it's fairly efficacious. Like, it's pretty decent. And so, even if there's like a little bump, it would have to be a pretty significant spike, I think, to prevent the Ford administration from wanting to move forward with reopening. Right? It would have to be something significant. Oh, yeah.
All right, so we are fun.
Biden abandoned his biggest campaign promises. Yeah, of course. Of course. Did we? I don't know why we ever, like, who believed him? Who was sitting there being like, Biden said that he's going to do that, and so he's going to do it. Yeah, Joe Biden. Like, wow. Okay. Got a bridge to sell you, bud. WestJet workers join Unifor. Okay. See, it's fucking happening, man. Like, there are large-scale organizations that are starting to be like, nah, these capitalists are sociopaths. We need to at least band together and negotiate against them. Yeah, not everyone has vaccine. That's true. That's true. Well, and once you... And, like, as much as I'm trying to be hopeful about it, right? Like, once you step out into the meta, right? Into the larger world scene, not only not everybody has the vaccine, but we're not making any attempts to get the vaccine to them. Like India, for example, right? Hey, Jeff, how you doing today, bud? Like, these places don't have any, like, so, like, India doesn't have the wealth to be able to buy the vaccine, right? And, like, billionaires like Bill Gates have been extremely upfront about it, that they're not going to sell the vaccine to these people for cheap, right? They are going to leverage the vaccine against them, enslave their population if they have to, right? Which, that's a classic capitalist move. But it blows up in our faces, right? Because it's going to spread, it's going to create a variant that is going to come on in here, right? And then we're back to this again, right? RCMP hands out over $20,000 in fines after a large house party in Cole Harbour, Nova Scotia. Nova Scotia seems to be the one place that's, like, really taking this a lot more seriously than the rest of us, right? Like, yeah, COVID will keep going around the global racetrack and keep coming back. Well, and, like, these things mutate and change, and it could get more serious and more deadly. Like, it could. Oh, that's 44 minutes long. No thanks. The real virus is communism. COVID-19 is just how it spreads. Oh yeah. Any society that would give up a little liberty to gain a little security will deserve neither and lose both. I mean, yes, but Benjamin Franklin didn't have to deal with like a global pandemic. So, I mean, like, how much credence are we going to put on like the back of a fellow who was participating openly in slavery and genocide of several populations at the time? Like, how much weight are we going to put on this, really? Well, now there's that black mold disease in Israel, in India rather. Oh, come on, Ruth, don't hit me with that. Don't hit me with that. Black mold disease. I'm just imagining people and they've got like black mold on them. Man, everybody's sharing just beautiful pictures right now. They're just like, yeah, politics, yeah, COVID, all that kind of stuff. Take a look at this beautiful picture. And there is like part of me that's like, yeah, let's just take a look at a beautiful picture. Okay, Ruth, we got a black mold disease, India. We got to look into that now. Oh my goodness. What is black fungus and why India is at great risk? Mucormycosis. Okay. Dubbed black fungus, is caused by a mold found in soil and in decaying organic matter, like rotting leaves. Several thousand coronavirus patients in India has contracted a deadly and aggressive fungal infection. Ugh. By breathing in the fungal spores that can spread, all over. Oh, and dead tissue has to be scraped away. Oh my God. Surgeons sometimes have to remove patients' nose, eyes, or even their jaw to stop it from getting to their brain. The average fatality rate is 54%. Okay, it's not contagious. Oh yeah, okay. So it's a fungus that exists in India that you can inhale, and if you're an otherwise healthy person, you can fight it off yourself. But if you have coronavirus, your immune system is completely you don't have an immune system. All right. Okay. That's not as scary as I thought it was going to be. That's just like the classic, like, yeah, there's shit floating around. It'll get into your stuff. And if you're in the middle of a pandemic, which weakens or compromises your immune system, you'll see more people die of it. Yeah, I figured it out. I said it right before you typed it. Compromised. You saw me, Jeff. I was like, their immune system is, yeah, you got it. I know, that's why they need the shots badly. They do need the shots badly, and we're withholding it from them. We're literally, like, allowing, we're allowing the coronavirus to mutate. It's like we're doing it on purpose. Like, I can't think of anything stupider. Is organized labor making a comeback? I hope so. I hope so. I mean, it's proving to be completely necessary, right? Like, these capitalists are not interested. Yeah, it is a medical genocide. Like, we know what should be done. We know how to do it. We're just not doing it. And we're not doing it so that Bill Gates can make more money, right? One of the things I hope comes out of this pandemic for sure is that people stop treating Bill Gates as if he's just like, oh, he's just like this innocuous, nerdy kind of guy. Like, this guy's a fucking raging sociopath. Like, withholding a vaccine from a populace because they can't afford it while you are literally creating enough to throw in the garbage. Like, it's absolutely brutal. I wish people knew how damn near impossible legal immigration is. I've gotten my high school diploma, Bachelor of Arts, and JD in the U.S. legally. Still had a work visa denied because my proposed endeavor of being a public defender only benefits the poor and indignant and is not of interest to the nation. Yeah, they don't want people helping the poor. They're not interested in that. To all the Americans out there, remember, if you work hard and dream hard, you might just be able to afford basic necessities that other countries guarantee to all their people. Yep. Look at all the beautiful pictures people are putting up, man. People had a really nice weekend. You can really, really tell. People are putting up some really gorgeous pictures. Yeah, profits over people, that's exactly right. We're waiting a week to decide if we will send expired vaccines to them. Yeah. And like this attitude does affect us as well. Like I was talking to my dad yesterday. He lives in Manitoba, where I'm from, and Brian Pallister, the conservative leader there, he's trying to get some vaccines sent up from Montana. They have something like 10,000, maybe even 100,000 vaccines that are going to expire in a week. And so Brian Pallister's like, let's get him, let's have him, and he's got the money, he's got the all of the wherewithal and all this kind of stuff, but because it needs to cross federal lines, he needs the permission of, like, literally he needs the permission of Joe Biden directly, and Joe Biden's saying no, right? And why is Joe Biden saying no? Just petty politics, just bullshit, right? Like, and so these vaccines are going to expire. And that's that. Banks collected $12.4 billion in overdraft fees in 2020. That means banks took over $12 billion from people with no money during a global pandemic. Yeah. Yeah. Like, the more I learn and the more I see, the more I understand that our entire society for the last 40 years has been completely, and I mean completely, inverted. Like, we have been focusing on exactly the wrong things. Like, the opposite of the stuff we should be focusing on. Canada received 600,000 Pfizer coronavirus vaccine doses this week. So, go get your vaccines. I know I'm gonna get mine all worked out. Look at this. Activist forced shutdown of Israeli weapons factory in UK. Finally, some good news. Palestine action. Well, because we all know now that they called a it's coming, Ruth. It's coming. They called a ceasefire. They called a ceasefire between Israel and Palestine. It lasted like 2 days. And then Israel's back on it, right? They just start the bombing again. Barricaded gates, destroyed property, vandalized the premises to prevent any more British-made drones being sent to commit atrocities in Gaza. Great. Perfect. As far as I'm concerned, like, that's great. These kids should keep doing that. Keep blowing that stuff up. Don't send weapons to the IDF. Just don't do it. It is your moral imperative to prevent the sale of weapons. Oh, look at this. Beautiful trees. Beautiful. Man, I am tired today, man. I just had one of those days. Like, I went out to the beach, and I think my brain got cooked. And I was trying to go to sleep, and it was just like, I could feel my brain sizzling. Couldn't sleep at all. So now I'm just sitting here, and I'm like, whew. I am tired, man. I am tired. Please stop voting for corporate bribed Dems forever. Yeah. A short history of corporate tax rates. 34, 35, 35, 35, 21. Biden's original plan, 28. Biden's compromise plan, 25. Yeah, this is why the Dems need to stop negotiating with themselves, and why we need to stop negotiating with capitalists. Like, the negotiations need to end, man. We need to take power away from these guys. Like, they have no problem restructuring the whole system to benefit them and completely destroy us. Like, they've got no problem with that, as seen here. There's even time lapses. People had a nice weekend, man. It was a nice weekend. You can really tell. Usually my feed is just like news, maybe some memes, like, but now you got like this kind of glorious stuff. Yeah, that's nice. That's nice. Glad people are having a good time. Hope you guys had a good weekend. Anti-Chinese propaganda keeps the Empire citizens unaware that socialism is working. Yep. Like, it's working. Like, what they're doing in China is working. I wonder if they're going to actually have some facts and figures and stuff. Yep. Experiencing... for the imperialists. Entail, more military buildup, reduction of wages and social, just like attacking everybody, assaulting everybody. I'm glad you had a good weekend, Jeff. I'm glad that it went well for you. Working the weekend shifts. Is that any different than the weekday shifts? I know you're working in the shelters. Is it? What's like, what would be the difference? Because I imagine it's not like retail. Like in retail, the weekend shifts are the busy ones, right? Because that's when people are free. But, oh, you get less staff on the weekends? But it's just as busy, or is it busier? Okay, so I was sort of hoping that this article would have, like, information about the good stuff that China is doing for its own people, but... So, look at this. People are taking pictures of, like, just barns and stuff. Perfect. Yeah, CPC takes people's interests as top priority. CPUSA co-chair, Rosanna Cameron. Yep. Having to pay $900 to hear about your son's death. I honest to God got a bill for the EMTs telling me my son was dead. Jesus. This is, what a soulless system, right? Like, what an inhuman system. Charging people for the EMT informing her that her son is dead. Ugh. That's brutal, man. Paying my monthly rent that's tripled since 2001 with my paycheck that's the same dollar amount my dad was making in 1993. Then opening the newspaper and reading stories about why no one has kids anymore. Yeah. Like, this has steadily become, in my view, the number one method to dismantle sort of that conservative positioning, right? Of just like outright say to your parents, I will not have kids. Like, no, you don't get grandchildren. Capitalism is destroying my life. Like, stop voting for it. Why do you keep voting for the destruction of my life and the insurance that I will never have children? Like, it really is getting to be that simple, where like 30-year-olds, and it should be like 20-year-olds, should literally just start saying to these 60-year-olds, we're not having kids, dude. You don't get grandchildren. It's over. Like, capitalism has failed. It's obviously failed. Like, and you want to know how we know it's failed? You don't get kids. And I've even seen advertisements from like realtors and things like this who are aware of this. They know that this is what's happening, and they're putting up ads with like an old man sitting beside like a young kid, and it literally says, "Want kids? Buy your kids, or want grandkids? Buy your kids a house." It's like, yeah, dude, like, you're not... The only people I know who are actually having kids are people who got, like, the big-time job, right? Like the doctor, lawyer, engineer kind of stuff. And even then, they're exhausted and constantly working, but they know they have that financial backing. Or people who literally are going to have their parents buy them a house, right? That's built into their life's journey. So it's like, but if you don't have those things, if you're just like a retail worker, right? It's not going to happen. Yeah, who will pay for pensions and taxes if there are no future generations? Which is why it's important that they bomb the hell out of the Middle East, right? Get as many refugees and immigrants in here as possible, right? And then keep those immigrants in line with a right wing that shakes their fist at them as often as they can, right? Like, it's all about control. It's all about just controlling them. And, like, they know we're not having kids. And moreover, they're not interested in solving that problem, right? Like, our rulers do not care if we have kids or not. They're not interested in that. They don't care. Like, oh no, your base desire to reproduce. We don't give a shit at all. We're not gonna restructure the society to make it easier for you to have kids. Forget that.
I'm in a funk.
Too long. Matt Gaetz and oh yeah, this crazy nut job. I can't even deal with how crazy this lady is, and like her and Gaetz match made in heaven. Yeah, one of my children has a child. One has a dog he considers his child, and that's what we've done, right? I know, like, me and my girlfriend, we got a dog because we knew that we were never going to be able to afford a kid. Like, we were never going to be able to do that. And so, in a funny kind of way, he has ended up becoming our, like, little kid. Like, we know he's just a dog, but he's a sweetheart, and I love him. And I know it's the best that's going to happen for me, right? Like, even if I found another, like, I'm single now, so even if I found somebody now, like, I'm not going to have a kid. Like, I'm not bringing a kid into this mess. Are you kidding me? Like, forget, I'd literally have to, like, sacrifice my entire existence. Like, every waking moment of my life would be focused on just dealing with capitalism and then ensuring this kid doesn't die. And it's, no thank you. Like, no thank you. I'm glad they're more in tune while floating around on the oceans they're killing. Yeah, today's super yacht owners are younger and more in tune with the climate crisis around us. Hey, Faye. I just can't imagine what it must be like to be so disconnected, right? To just be, like, so completely detached from reality and from the world that we live in. All right. Well, I think this is the number that we're going to get right now. So I am going to put on Chris Hedges, The American Empire. This is one of his more important speeches, I think, and why I think it's... I think that this is just the visual, so I don't think there's actually, like... I don't think there is actually more to it than this. Yeah, and... So I'm just going to leave the webcam on, leave the chat on. Maybe I'll tap in chat. Maybe I'll type in chat. Bibbidi bobbidi.
The American empire is coming to an end. Overseeing this descent at the highest levels of the federal and state governments is a motley collection of imbeciles, con artists, thieves, opportunists, and warmongering generals. And to be clear, I include the Democratic Party. Short of a sudden and widespread popular revolt, the death spiral appears unstoppable, meaning the United States as we know it will no longer exist in a decade, or at most, 2.
Christopher Hedges is the author of America, the Farewell Tour. You can find a link to it and to his other books on our website, cbc.ca/ideas, where you can always get our podcast.
We do not become autonomous and free human beings by building pathetic, tiny monuments to ourselves. It is through self-sacrifice and humility that we affirm the sanctity of others and the sanctity of ourselves. Those who fight against cultural malice, whether squatting in old warehouses or as the Occupy movement did in taking over a public space, resisting in Standing Rock, or refusing to be broken by our prison system, have discovered that life is measured by infinitesimal and often unacknowledged acts of solidarity and kindness. These acts of kindness, like the nearly invisible strands of a spider's web, spin outward to connect our atomized and alienated souls to others. This belief, held although we may never see empirical proof, is profoundly transformative. But know this, when these acts are carried out on behalf of the oppressed and the demonized, when compassion defines the core of our lives, when we understand that justice is a manifestation of love, we are marginalized and condemned by our sociopathic elites. Those who resist effectively in the years ahead may not be able to stem the economic decline, the mounting political dysfunction, the collapse of empire, and the ecological disasters. But they will draw from acts of kindness and the kindness of others, the strength and courage to endure. It will be from these relationships, ones formed the way all genuine relationships form, face to face, rather than electronically, that radical organizations will rise from the ashes to resist.
Capitalism, interrupting this to sell you garbage.
Predicting the disintegration of America has been something of an industry among the chattering classes for a while, and it's accelerated in the last couple of years. But after the Sandy Hook school massacre, in which 20 children were fatally shot, Hedges wrote an article in 2013 for the Walrus magazine, where I happened to be working at the time. That article was uncanny in the way it looked ahead at the America which was to come. In it, he quoted the late American philosopher Richard Rorty, who said, and I'm quoting here, that when America's breakdown begins,
the gains made in the past 40 years
by black and brown Americans
and by homosexuals will be wiped out. Jocular contempt for women will come back into fashion. All the resentment which badly educated Americans feel about having their manners dictated to them by college graduates will find an outlet.
That was in 2013, and those words now seem prophetic.
Well, he wrote it even before then.
Yeah. Were they?
Well, there are intellectuals in the United States who understood what was happening, but they were pushed so far to the margins that their voices were not heard. Sheldon Wolin, for example, who we lost a couple years ago, taught at Berkeley and Princeton, wrote Democracy Incorporated. And these figures who as Rorty did, of course, called out the folly of neoliberalism were silenced, in essence. That critique was just unpalatable across the mainstream. So I think the serious critics of culture, Neil Postman, they knew what was coming.
There have been other moments of deep division in crisis in America, the Civil War, the Great Depression, the Red Scare, Vietnam, on and on it goes. What makes this particular moment distinct and different?
We've trashed our economy. We've deindustrialized the country. We've allowed our economic system to be seized by global speculators. And that, coupled with the century-long assault against radical and progressive movements, beginning in World War I, but with the Red Scare after World War I, the Palmer raids. We saw a reemergence of those movements and unions because unions, like for instance the old United Mine Workers Union, didn't come back into existence until the 1930s when Roosevelt permitted it to come back into existence. So with the breakdown of capitalism, there was a resurgence, but we were still in an industrialized country. We still had factories. We still made things. And that's where you get this kind of golden period of capitalist democracy in the 1950s. But alongside that was a steady assault beginning with the 1948 Taft-Hartley Act, which makes it very difficult for unions to organize. You saw a chipping away of New Deal programs. Remember Roosevelt, with the massive unemployment, said if the private sector is incapable of providing jobs, then the government has to provide jobs, providing 12 million jobs. Social Security, And Roosevelt says that his greatest achievement is that he saved democracy. So we lost the radical and progressive. And then after the war, in the name of anti-communism, they disemboweled liberal institutions themselves, ending with this parody of what it means to be a liberal Democrat in the Clinton administration. The Clinton administration, or the Democratic Party under Bill Clinton, essentially became the Republican Party. It took over the issue of law and order, which was really a kind of code for the institutional racism which African Americans continue to suffer from. It was Clinton who expanded the prison system from 700,000 to over 2 million in the 1994 Omnibus Crime Bill, deregulating the FCC. So now we have about 5 or 6 corporations that control what 90% of Americans listen to and watch. It was under Clinton that we destroyed our welfare program. And 70% of the original recipients of welfare were children. It's under Clinton that we destroyed Glass-Steagall, and you didn't have a banking crisis in Canada because Chrétien didn't allow it.
Yeah.
He didn't rip down the firewalls between commercial and investment banks. Clinton did, which is what precipitated both our and the global financial crisis in 2008. So it became like the late Roman Republic, where the institutions and the language and iconography of democracy existed, but internally had become so corrupted, in essence been seized by corporate power, as to render it a mirage. And that, of course, sowed the seeds for Trump.
There's this 1986 film by the Quebec director Denis Arcand, and it's simply called The Decline of the American Empire. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it saw modern society's fixation on self-indulgence as an indicator of its decline. You've been talking about governments and corporations, but in the book you also talk on the individual level, this focus on self-indulgence. How are self-indulgence and decline related?
Well, that's a very important point. Yes, it became a society consumed by hedonism and narcissism, and it celebrated the qualities of psychopaths. You see it on any reality television show, that ability to manipulate, use, lie to others for your own advancement, a lack of empathy or capacity for remorse, the idea that wealth creates its own value, it doesn't matter how you achieve it, the yearning for celebrity, self-presentation, which is what Facebook and social media is fundamentally about. It's about what Neil Gabler called life, the movie. And what happened is our political system, our political campaigns, became forms of reality television itself. So you manufactured personalities. George W. Bush becomes somebody you'd want to have a beer with, for instance.
Yeah.
And you confuse how you are made to feel with knowledge. And Trump could play that game better. That's the first part. And the second part is that across the political spectrum, the American public realized that the elites had betrayed them. And Trump's caustic, vulgar insults, whether it was directed at George Bush or Hillary Clinton, were kind of cathartic to an extremely, I would say, legitimately angry, and in particular white working class population that had been lied to. And of course the anger was even greater at the Democratic Party because figures like Clinton or Obama continued to speak in that feel your pain language of liberalism while serving corporate power. And of course we saw that in 2008 with Obama's response, which was to bail out the banks and Goldman Sachs, the people who carried out the fraud, and turn his back on the victims.
And is that the moment that it hit home for you, that America was on the decline, or was it earlier than that you were seeing these signs?
No, much earlier. First of all, I spent 20 years overseas. So I was very rarely in this country for 2 decades. And the changes that had taken place within the country were much more dramatic and starker upon my return. What corporations have done to former industrial cities like Camden, New Jersey, which per capita is the poorest city in the United States, or the coal fields of southern West Virginia, where they have turned the Appalachian Mountains into a toxic wasteland because they won't stop. And I think that comes from being a reporter and not sitting around Manhattan. And because if you get out there and listen, It's grim. And I have to raise pornography. I mean, we are a deeply pornified society, which fits completely with heartless capitalism where everybody and everything, including the natural world, becomes a commodity that you exploit until exhaustion or collapse.
I wonder, though, if there's a conceptual trap within the very idea of talking about America's decline at this moment. Because the United States itself was founded on this contradiction, a free and democratic nation that was built on enslaving millions of Africans and on the genocide of indigenous people. You know, I think about the African-American poet Langston Hughes, who wrote, "America never was America to me." So is America actually in decline, or are these fault lines and these contradictions just much more visible and perilous now?
Well, it is in decline in terms of its economic and its political power. I mean, China has overtaken it as the major manufacturing center of the world. But I think much of the decay, and James Baldwin writes about this, comes from the refusal on the part of especially the white majority to face who they were and where they came from, to mythologize the national myth. That whole notion of regeneration through violence. I mean, we as Americans are a deeply violent culture in a way that Canadians are not. And we still believe in the idea that violence is a form of purification. We have failed to confront who we were and what we did. African Americans who have never been paid reparations, although they built the country. And that inability to see ourselves for who we are has created these monstrosities, and Trump is a kind of case study for it. America was founded, as you point out, on, the quote-unquote founding fathers. Read what they wrote about Native Americans. They just wanted them all wiped out. It was a white, slave-holding, male, aristocratic elite. Women were disenfranchised. Men without property were disenfranchised. Of course, African Americans, Native Americans. And it was a closed system. The senators, which did the real legislative work, were appointed. And so the entire battle for American democracy, which Howard Zinn writes about in The People's History of the United States, has been one by which many hundreds, probably thousands of Americans have lost their lives. We had the bloodiest labor wars in the industrialized world. Hundreds of American workers were murdered. So they've won. It's been quite effective. John Ralston Saul calls it the corporate coup d'etat in slow motion. I don't always credit him, but I do in Canada.
Well, in Canada. So, Chris, when for you then was America closest to the ideal that it had for itself? Was there a moment or a period?
Well, I would say the ideal that America had for itself was one that we had to destroy if we were going to have an open society and a democratic system. And that battle has won.
How do you mean?
Well, the people who envisioned, I mean, if you read the Federalist Papers, they were terrified of popular will. They were grounded in Locke, who built an entire judicial system on the primacy of property rights as opposed to individual rights. They were racist. And so, in that sense, it was democracy for a few and autocracy for everyone else. So that has been a constant battle since the founding of the country. We have had moments on the eve of World War I where popular movements, the old Wobblies, the CIO, the Communist Party, who was an important force that erased from U.S. history, the progressive movement, on and on and on. And so it's been a kind of seesaw. It's been a kind of back and forth. And we are now at a point where we've been utterly disarmed. We don't even have the vocabulary to explain what's happening to us, which is one of the most egregious class wars waged in the industrialized world. We'd have to go back to the Louis of late France, no, really, to find social inequality at this level. It's the worst income inequality in the United States since the Gilded Age, and it's worse than the Gilded Age, and it's getting worse. There's nothing left. I mean, we just saw massive tax cuts, which will remove an estimated $1.5 trillion over 10 years from government revenue. It's insane. And what are these people doing with their cuts and their money? They're hoarding the money, or they're buying back their stock. That's how you get the inflated stock market, which isn't sustainable. because the major managers and CEOs, their compensation packages are tied to the stock. So it becomes Marx's understanding of fictitious capital, money making money. And at the same time, after the 2008 crash, they were lent, who knows, 4-7 trillion, whatever the figure is, dollars, by the Fed at 0% interest. And we had central banks in Europe, because this is global, lending money at negative percentage. They'd pay you to take money. But the money has to be repaid. So since they're not building anything or producing anything, it's through debt peonage. And that's where you get $1.4 trillion in student loans, which even if you declare bankruptcy still have to be repaid. That's where you get massive credit card debt. A year later on your credit card is 28%. Our healthcare system, which even if you have insurance, you're bombarded with rising quote-unquote co-payments, costs that aren't covered, and it's the most expensive and least efficient healthcare system in the industrialized world. So they are extracting their pound of flesh through austerity programs, forcing municipalities, I write about this in the beginning of the book with Scranton, to sell off sewer systems, parking authorities, utilities to private corporations who then jack up the rates. And so that predatory nature, it has created, Carl Polanyi writes about this, it's a mafia economy and ultimately a mafia political system. I mean, Trump and the people around him it is just an unchecked kleptocracy, both personally for the Trump family, but for the billionaire class. We see it with the privatization of public education. Why? Because the Department of Education spends $63 billion a year, and the hedge fund managers want it.
Well, Chris, I want to offer a counter argument to you. So, Ideas spoke with Harvard psychologist Steven Pinker about his book Enlightenment Now. And in it, he argues, counter to what you argue, that most things have actually gotten better for most people over the decades, not worse. He says that health, longevity, literacy, income, and so on have actually improved. And he takes to task a certain kind of intellectual who seems to be more committed to despair than to progress.
The Enlightenment has worked. Perhaps the greatest story seldom told. And because this triumph is so unsung, the underlying ideals of reason, science, and humanism are unappreciated as well. Far from being an insipid consensus, these ideals are treated by today's intellectuals with indifference, skepticism, and sometimes contempt. Given the tremendous progress we've made in the past quarter millennium, the past 250 years, I don't think there's any reason to think that it will suddenly do a U-turn. There have been predictions like that for as long as the Enlightenment has been in existence. There's been a counter-Enlightenment, which includes a kind of fatalism, a kind of pessimism. Spengler wrote in the 19-teens and expected that the West would decline, and it didn't happen. The world has been coming to an end for a very long time indeed, if you were to go by the predictions of these rather morose intellectuals. It's not a guarantee that we will avert disaster. No one could make such a guarantee. But you have to take with a grain of salt the constant predictions that this generation is special, that the progress that we have seen is suddenly going to end.
Steven Pinker mentions, quote, morose intellectuals and their constant predictions of the end. What do you think? Does he have a point?
No. He sounds like he's reading from Candide. He should get out of Harvard a little more. Figures like Pinker are popular because they tell us what we want to hear. But every single climate change report that I read has a subtext, which is that it is accelerating at a rate far faster than anyone predicted. I traveled all over the country for this book, from industrial wasteland to industrial wasteland. And the book was in many ways modeled after Emile Durkheim's book on suicide, that when you have a society in decay, it produces familiar pathologies, suicide being one, opioid addiction, hate groups, gambling. And then, having been a war correspondent, I just don't know. I just find Pinker's analysis to be completely unplugged from reality. The fact is, empires, civilizations die. That's something that Plato understood. They have natural life cycles. The American empire is coming to an end. The nation has lost the power and respect needed to induce allies in Europe, Latin America, Asia, and Africa to do its bidding. Add the mounting destruction caused by climate change, and you have a recipe for an emerging dystopia. The empire will limp along, steadily losing influence until the dollar is dropped as the world's reserve currency, plunging the United States into a crippling depression, and instantly forcing a massive contraction of its military machine. Many of the estimated 69 empires that have existed throughout history lacked competent leadership in their decline. They ceded power to monstrosities such as the Roman emperors Caligula and Nero, or imbecile narcissists like Trump. We're not immortal any more than any other empire. The difference this time is that when we go down, we'll bring the whole planet with us. Yeah. And I find figures like Pinker very dangerous because it is the perpetuation of the myth of human progress, the idea that progress is inevitable. You know, he mentioned the Enlightenment. Well, it was the Enlightenment that gave us the Jacobins and ultimately the fascists and the communists. The idea that you could create a perfect world, as Dr. Pangloss said, by eradicating certain elements of that world. That comes directly out of the Enlightenment. So there's always been a very dark side to the Enlightenment, the utopian belief that we could create the perfect society if certain segments of that society were wiped out.
You talk about Marx and quote Marx at length in the book. Is Marxism a kind of utopianism?
Completely. I am not a Marxist, but Marx's critique of capital is probably the most important critique of capital. And remember that it was heavily reported. He and Engels, of course, ran textile firms. He knew what he was talking about. And Marx used a lot of Engels' data. So if I was running a hedge fund on Wall Street, I'll only hire Marxists because they understand that capitalism is about the exploitation of labor, the maximization of profit, and reducing the cost of labor. That's what Marx got. So Marx's solution is not something that is as utopian as any other kind of fantastic belief. I mean, the problem with Marx, and I graduated from Harvard Divinity School, so I kind of come out of Calvin, is that he doesn't grasp human nature. He's, once he gets into his solution, I'm not with him. But in terms of his study of capitalism, he understood. He understood the nature of capitalism, he understood how it worked, and he understood where it was going. Marx warned that capitalism had built within it the seeds of its own destruction. There would come a day when capitalism would exhaust its potential and collapse. Marx did not know when that day would come, but he also knew that capitalist expansion was not eternally sustainable. Unable to expand and generate profits at past levels, the capitalist system would begin to consume the structures that sustained it. It would prey upon, in the name of austerity, the working class and the poor, driving them ever deeper into debt and poverty, and diminishing the capacity of the state to serve the basic needs of ordinary citizens. It would, as it has, increasingly automate or relocate jobs, including both manufacturing and professional positions, to countries with cheap pools of labor. This would trigger an economic assault on not only the working class, but the middle class, the bulwark of a capitalist democracy, that would be disguised by massive personal debt as incomes declined or remained stagnant and borrowing soared. Politics would, in the late stages of capitalism, become subordinate to economics, leading to political parties hollowed out of any real political content and abjectly subservient to the dictates of corporations. But as Marx warned, there is a limit to an economy built on austerity and the scaffolding of debt. There comes a moment, Marx knew, when there would be no new markets available and no new pools of people who could take on more debt. Capitalist oligarchs, meanwhile, hoard huge sums of wealth, $7.6 trillion, stashed in overseas tax havens, exacted as tribute from those they dominate in debt and impoverish. Capitalism would, in the end, Marx said, turn on the so-called free market, along with the values and traditions it claimed to defend. It would, in its final stages, pillage the systems and structures that made capitalism possible. It would resort, as it causes widespread suffering, to harsher forms of repression to maintain social control. It would attempt, in a frantic last stand, to extract profit by looting and pillaging state institutions, contradicting its stated nature.
Oh hey, I'm Neha, host of Asking for a Friend. I'm here and ready to help you answer your...
Well, I want to dig into corporatism and capitalism a bit more. You write that capitalism would attempt, quote, in a frantic last stand to extract profit by looting and pillaging state institutions, contradicting its stated nature. What is capitalism's stated nature?
That the market determines behavior, that when capitalist entities are unable to generate profit and collapse, they should die. And of course, all of this was exposed as a lie after 2008. And of course, with the impoverishment of the American working class, it's difficult to expand markets. Then, as Marx understood, these entities cannibalize the structures that make a capitalist democracy possible. We spoke earlier about the education system. But this is just now writ large throughout all aspects of American government. 70% of U.S. intelligence is privatized. Corporations like Bose Allen Hamilton, which gets 99% of its revenue from the U.S. government. We have Eric Prince, the brother of Betsy DeVos, making a push to privatize the war in Afghanistan, which has not gone particularly well. In fact, of course, we're losing it. But that doesn't matter because you have the war industry is making a killing. It's not good for anyone in Afghanistan. It's not good for us. It's certainly not good for stability within the Middle East. But it is good for this narrow segment of the country, i.e. those corporations which profit from it, and war has always been a business. So capitalism, the nature of capitalism, as it's described by the Chicago School and others, bears no resemblance to the reality of capitalism. The creation of monopolies so that you destroy competition, the constant consolidation of these mega corporations, which then not only fix prices and jack prices up, but we know from SEC investigations fix LIBOR rates. I mean, they fix everything. So it's not really capitalism. And then when they get in trouble, it's corporate socialism. They go running to the state and loot the U.S. Treasury.
Well, and you, in this book, you travel across America to communities and cities across the country. So where have you personally seen that frantic last stand and that pillaging taking place on that ground level?
Well, I write out of Anderson, Indiana. So Anderson, Indiana used to be one of the major manufacturing centers for GM. Clinton passes NAFTA. GM moves to Monterrey, Mexico. They leveled a lot of those giant plants. So there's just these massive weed-choked fields. 25,000 workers with good union jobs, $25, $30 an hour, sometimes more. Health benefits, a pension plan, a union, gone. And the city, like all deindustrialized pockets, is in freefall with all of the attendant problems that I write about in the book, including massive problems with opioid overdoses. And there, I drove through the streets and churches are for sale. I mean, everything's closing up. A whole section of the city doesn't even have a supermarket. It's this descent where everybody just eats processed food from a convenience store. And so I was with a lot of the old UAW workers, and they told me that Bernie Sanders had huge support. But once Sanders was denied the nomination, I would argue the Democratic establishment fixed it so he couldn't get it, they voted for Trump. They weren't going to vote for Clinton, not after what had been done to them. And Anderson, like Scranton, you can just tick off almost every city in America, especially between the coasts. And you drive through it, and it's potholed streets, streetlights are burned out, public libraries are closed. In Camden, the library is gutted and there's a tree growing out of it. And this, of course, gets into the whole issue on the failure of the part of the elites to address the social inequality that is deforming and destroying the country and that created Trump. Russia had nothing to do with it, and neither did Comey or the Podesta emails. It had to do with a rapacious, greedy, myopic elite that embraced an ideology which was ridiculous from its start, neoliberalism, as David Harvey points out in his very good book, to enrich themselves and their class.
You're listening to Ideas on CBC Radio, SiriusXM, and cbc.ca/ideas, where you can always get our podcast. I'm Rachel Giza, sitting in for Paul Kennedy. Christopher Hedges is a columnist for the website Truthdig. He spent nearly 2 decades as a foreign correspondent, mostly with the New York Times, in Central America, the Middle East, Africa, and the Balkans. He was part of the team which won a Pulitzer Prize in 2002 for its coverage of global terrorism. And in the same year, he also received the Amnesty International Global Award for Human Rights Journalism. Chris Hedges has also written over a dozen books. In this episode, we're talking about his most recent one, America, the Farewell Tour.
I'm just going to pause for a second here because there's a couple of comments that I want to just briefly... Marxism is utopian. Whoa. Yeah, Marxism is utopian. I'm a communist. I call myself a communist. But Karl Marx himself was a utopian. And I think Hedges' critique of Marx is accurate. That on the front end, Marx's critique of capitalism is absolutely amazing, but he didn't really have much by way of solutions. Like, he didn't really know where to go, which, I mean, that really reveals itself in the societies that have attempted to use Marxism as the basis of moving forward, and why they're always so experimental, and why they're always moving in different directions, and why they're trying all kinds of different stuff. And you even have like the Chinese Communist Party using, in small scale degrees, capitalist solutions to certain problems, because ultimately, like, Marx doesn't really provide a solution, because how could he know where to go? And so he ends up being just kind of like, he uses phrases like a worker's paradise, right? Like classless society, the idea that we can even get to these sorts of things, right? It's sort of a far-flung vision, but all of that aside, he's still his critique of capitalism is still the critique of capitalism. And also, if anybody's in this chat right now and you haven't seen my video that I just recently did called "The Quiet Rise of Fascism, of Canadian Fascism," please watch that, because I talk about the Canadian Infrastructure Bank, which I consider to be the most dangerous institution in Canada now. It is an explicitly fascist institution. It's built to be a fascist institution. It entrenches wealth into our society and allows the wealthy to do exactly what Hedges is talking about here, just to pillage the public sector and to pillage all of us. So please check that one out. And Dan and Nicholas, thanks for being here, guys. I appreciate it. And if anybody wants to make any further commentary, I'll talk about it after the video. Okay, let's get into part 2.
In which he argues that American society is in decline primarily because of systemic economic injustice, or what he calls casino capitalism.
Our casino capitalism has merged with the gambling industry. The entire system is parasitic. It is designed to prey on the desperate, young men and women burdened by student loans, underpaid workers burdened by credit card debt and mortgages, towns and cities forced to borrow to maintain municipal services. Casino magnates and hedge fund managers add nothing of value to society. They do not generate money. They redistribute it upward to the 1%.
Christopher Hedges also studied theology at Harvard Divinity School and is an ordained Presbyterian minister. His view of humanity is dark, as he readily admits, given his Calvinist worldview. And maybe it's that worldview that makes America, the Farewell Tour, read like a set of disturbing prophecies.
The most ominous danger we face comes from the marginalization and destruction of institutions, including the courts, academia, legislative bodies, cultural organizations, and the press, that once ensured that civil discourse was rooted in reality and fact, helped us distinguish lies from truth, and facilitated justice. Trump and today's Republican Party represent the last stage in the emergence of corporate totalitarianism. Pillage and oppression are justified by the permanent lie. The permanent lie is different from the falsehoods and half-truths uttered by politicians such as Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and Barack Obama. The common political lie these politicians employed was not designed to cancel out reality. The permanent lie is not circumscribed by reality. It is perpetuated even in the face of overwhelming evidence that discredits it. It is irrational. Those who speak in the language of truth and fact are attacked as liars, traitors, and purveyors of fake news. They are banished from the public sphere once totalitarian elites accrue sufficient power, a power now granted to them with the revoking of net neutrality. The iron refusal by those who engage in the permanent lie to acknowledge reality, no matter how transparent reality becomes, creates a collective psychosis.
Chris, you write about something you call the permanent lie. What is that lie?
The permanent lie ignores reality completely. And this, of course, is the danger of the Trump administration, where reality doesn't matter. And it's endemic to all totalitarian societies, where you perpetually broadcast falsehoods, and it creates a kind of collective schizophrenia, because what you see around you doesn't have any relation to what you hear, and yet the message is so overpowering that you're kind of knocked off balance. You don't know what is true and what is false. And that is a characteristic of all totalitarian societies.
This so-called post-truth phenomenon where, as you're saying, the facts don't matter, we're bombarded with lies, memes like alternative facts and truth isn't truth are making the rounds. You call this irrational and ominous. How is this kind of irrationality ominous?
Well, because when you, as we have done, destroy institutions, that would be the press, the courts, academia, whose job is to keep civil and political discourse rooted in verifiable fact. Once facts are interchangeable with opinions, then it becomes an Alice in Wonderland kind of experience where nothing makes sense. I mean, what does Alice say at one point? Do cats eat mice, or do mice eat cats, or do cats eat mice? Well, it doesn't really matter. Well, that's Trump right there. And a society unmoored from verifiable fact is a society in deep distress. And it creates a kind of paralysis. Those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities. Voltaire. I found this in my book on the Christian right. You can't have a rational discourse with someone who believes that every living creature and the entire world was created in 6 days, and that the T-Rex was in the Garden of Eden with Adam and Eve, who were real people, and they put a saddle on T-Rex and rode it around, which is in the diorama that's in the Creationist Museum in Peterborough, Kentucky. And you laugh at it on the outside, but I went through that museum with crowds of people who believe it. And then when a significant portion of your population retreats into this form of magical thinking, you're utterly unable to respond to reality itself in a rational or a meaningful way.
Well, and I'm curious about that because there is this intense loyalty by white evangelicals to Trump, who is not in any way a Christian-seeming person in how he conducts himself. It doesn't appear rational, the allegiance to Trump from a group of people who are at odds with everything that he embodies. So how much do you think that the rise of the religious right has contributed to this rise of irrationality and post-truth reality that we're living in?
Well, I mean, remember, they have their own universities, their own systems of indoctrination through Christian television and broadcasting. You know, the New York Times, when they run the bestseller list, they don't include quote-unquote Christian books because it would dominate every single one on the list. I would argue that they are completely in sync with Trump. I covered these people. These mega churches are run by pastors who are as sleazy and corrupt as Trump. They can't be questioned. They're in direct contact with God. That's the first part. The second part is I don't look at the Christian right as a religious movement. They're Christian heretics. They have used biblical language to sanctify the worst aspects of American capitalism, white supremacy, and imperialism. And fundamentally, they are groups that are about hate. They are biblically illiterate. I mean, as soon as they found out I graduated, my father was a minister, I graduated from divinity school, and I spent 2 years with him. As soon as they found out I came out of a biblical tradition, they did not want to talk about the Bible with me because they're selective literalists. They have been handed certain passages that they use to justify an ideology. So 81% of quote-unquote evangelicals support Trump. Trump has no belief system of his own, no ideology, and so this ideology is filling the vacuum. But they're the same. They are people who externalize evil. They are absolutists who believe that they cannot be questioned. They are intolerant of anybody outside their cultish belief system. They ostensibly present themselves as a moral force. I mean, Sarah Sanders attempts to do this as she lies every single day to the press and the American public. But what they are is a species of the German Christian church, which was created by the Nazis. So you had the Christian cross on one side and the Nazi flag on the other. It's the fusion of the iconography and language of the state with the religion. And that's extremely dangerous. So they use the sacral language of the Bible to deify the worst aspects of the United States.
Well, and it's also a movement that is palpably angry, it seems to me. And I feel like the anger you see coming from the religious right, we're seeing its echoes and its counterparts around the world, whether it's Hindu nationalism in India or the Burmese carnage which has been inflicted on the Rohingya. And in fact, one of the thinkers that you mentioned in your book was featured on this program, Pankaj Mishra.
Yeah, he's good.
Who wrote The Age of Anger, A History of the Present.
Whenever you have an economic crisis, you have political dysfunction, you have opaque forces of the global economy working on you, you can't identify them, and you will again start channeling your rage against whoever is nearest to you, immigrants, Muslims, Mexicans, and also women. You know, women have become in recent years the target of a whole lot of masculine rage. And again, you know, this is something we've seen before. This particular phenomena of, you know, people being promised empowerment, people being promised the emancipations of the modern world, and then discovering that this process of liberation is much, much harder than they imagined, basically generates a lot of rage, which is then turned against weaker peoples, which is channeled into all kinds of compensatory fantasies of power, whether it's cultural nationalism or militant violence.
This entrepreneur brand logo was done by a top freelancer on Fiverr. It's simply wow.
Why do militant violence and a mythologized, romanticized past so often get paired together?
Because you have an assault on identity. So I was walking through Montgomery, Alabama with Brian Stevenson, the great civil rights attorney who defends death row prisoners, most of whom, of course, are poor and black. And he's pointed out all the Confederate monuments in Montgomery, and half the city's black. And he said most of these were put up in the last 10 years. And I said, that reminds me of Yugoslavia, where you had the economic collapse of Yugoslavia, a sense of disempowerment, instability, a state that was unable to respond in a meaningful way to acute distress. And people created mythical narratives of the Serbs or the Croats or the Muslims to give themselves an identity and to sanctify their own hatred, which ultimately became a fratricide. So, yeah, I like Mishra a lot. I think he really understands it.
You're critical throughout America, the Farewell Tour, of progressives and identity politics. You write, and I'm quoting here, "The liberal church, like the bankrupt liberal class, holds up multiculturalism and identity politics as an ethical imperative and ignores the primacy of economic and social justice." Now, that term, identity politics, it gets used a lot, and I don't know that there's a consensus about what it means. So what does identity politics mean to you?
It means the promotion of a particular ethnicity, race, gender, and the belief that the elevation of someone who comes from that group is a form of empowerment. But of course, that's completely false. The corporate elites, and we begin going all the way back to the advertiser Bennington, Calvin Klein, who used to put up HIV positive models and stuff to be kind of risque. Obama was an example of this. You have just taken a page from colonialism, where they push out a Mobutu to do their bidding. And what matters is the system that they're serving. So the idea that a woman president is somehow beneficial to an empire run amok is an absurdity. It redefines what feminism should be, which is about the empowerment of oppressed women. Probably 3/4 of African Americans are living in worse poverty and worse violence in terms of what's happening in these militarized marginal communities than when King marched on Selma. And so the elites have learned to diversify. I mean, Trudeau did it with his cabinet. But that just becomes a kind of feint, a cover, to maintain a system of institutional racism and corporate exploitation, which is steadily turning the lives of the poor and working men and women into hell. They are approaching conditions. They've already embraced conditions not seen in the industrialized world since the textile mills of Manchester at the end of the 19th century. They've already reached those conditions in places like China and Bangladesh. But those conditions are increasingly defining what it means to be a worker in the United States. And let's not forget that corporations in the United States, we have 25% of the world's prison population, 2.3 million people, or 5% of the world's population. Again, mass incarceration is a form of social control of poor black and brown bodies, discarded, left behind in these deindustrialized pockets where they can't create an income. They're not creating an income for corporations on the streets, but lock them in a cage and they can generate $50,000 or $60,000 a year for prison contractors, private phone companies, private medical services, private money transfer companies, private commissaries, on and on and on. But you are now seeing American corporations, including big ones, Hewlett-Packard, McDonald's, will make its uniforms in the prison system because the argument the prison authorities make is you don't have to pay 22 or 32 cents an hour in Bangladesh. You can pay that in an American prison. They can't organize. They can't complain about working conditions. They can't get paid for sick days. And if there's any kind of a problem, we throw them into solitary for a year. So that kind of return to unbridled, exploitive systems of capitalism, it's already cemented into place. I mean, this is what Apple does with its subcontractors in China, where people climb, they fail to make their quotas, constant wage theft, and they climb to the top of these buildings and throw themselves off, etc. But that is increasingly defining working conditions in the first world.
But isn't there a way in a critique about economic injustice to talk about how identities based on race and gender complicate and exacerbate the problem of social injustice? I hear your point about making a woman president or making a black man president doesn't stop racism or sexism, but isn't it true that many people are oppressed worse because of the identities that they have? That we know that black women earn less than white women.
But that's economic justice. I mean, that's my whole point. So you take the Occupy movement. The Occupy movement was largely a white middle class kids who got out of college. There was no place. Well, they weren't joined by people from marginal communities of color, because these kids suddenly discovered that they couldn't find meaningful employment. We're dealing with issues of evictions, police violence. When you went to these marginal communities, they've been dealing with this for decades. And the question they legitimately asked was, where were you? Well, you were involved in your boutique activism about multicultural. So obviously, I support diversity. I want the empowerment of these groups, but not divorced from economic justice.
So do you think a movement like Black Lives Matter ticks those boxes for you? Do you feel like a movement that is speaking specifically about the experiences of, economic injustice, police brutality within African American communities and against African American people? Is that movement problematic to you because of identity politics, or do you feel like it marries the question of economic justice to racial identity?
Well, they're certainly aware of that there's a reason they're in Ferguson or Baltimore. But we have a crisis in the United States of police terror. 3.3 citizens a day, almost all unarmed, are shot dead. And almost all of them are poor people of color. And they are responding to that crisis of police terror. And terror is the right word, having come out of those communities. If you are a mother with a teenage son, and it's dark, you don't know if they're coming home. And I teach in a prison system, so I see it up close. The collapse of the judicial system. 94% of our prisoners never get a jury trial. They're forced to plea out, and the sentences are horrific, 3 or 4 times longer what they would be in any other country. So I think that those groups are important, but we're not going to successfully recreate a society whereby they have opportunity until we create an economic system where they can be integrated into that system. There are 3 forms of social control against the poor: mass incarceration, evictions, which is often ignored. So you lock up the men and you evict the women and children. And this gets into why I support reparations, why I support a guaranteed income, why I support the creation of government jobs. Until that's done, that problem, you can decry police violence all you want, but until these communities and families are resurrected and given a place in the society, those forms of social control are necessary by the corporate state to keep these people in check. Resistance entails suffering. It requires self-sacrifice. It accepts that we may be destroyed. It is not rational. It is not about the pursuit of happiness. It is about the pursuit of freedom. Resistance accepts that even if we fail, there is an inner freedom that comes with defiance. And perhaps this is the only freedom and true happiness we will ever know. To resist evil is the highest achievement of human life. It is the supreme act of love. It is to carry the cross, as the theologian James Cone reminds us, and to be acutely aware that what we are carrying is also what we will die upon.
You write so passionately about the ideal of resistance. Is resistance a spiritual act?
Yes.
How so?
It's an act of faith. Because empirically, everything you do in terms of resisting radical evil, as Kant called it, may show that all of your efforts have been futile. But it doesn't invalidate resistance. It's the belief, as Daniel Berrigan once told me, the great radical priest, that the good draws to it the good, even though there's nothing around us to justify that belief. The Buddhists call it karma. And I think that that's true. I think that having covered the revolutions in Eastern Europe, I saw how these great dissidents, I was in the Magic Lantern Theater in Prague every night with Václav Havel, that you keep that other moral narrative alive. And you don't always know who hears it, what effect it has, and it's only sustainable by faith. And I don't mean in kind of any orthodox religiosity. It's what Niebuhr calls sublime madness. The belief that, an act of resistance in itself confers freedom. And I think that's right, even if you fail. And it's bleak out there, but we can't use the word hope if we don't resist. I have children. These corporate forces have us by the throat, and they have my children by the throat. I don't know if we're even going to survive as a species. And we may fail. But, as parents, we have a duty to make sure that at least our children say they tried. And that will require forms of self-sacrifice. It will be unpleasant, maybe even dangerous. It means removing our faith in established systems of power, which have proven unable to deal with the most significant challenge to human life, which is climate change, which was first identified as a problem in 1902 or 1905. I mean, as the world devolves, people are going to look back at us and say, were we the good Germans? Did we just sit there and watch the trains roll by and do nothing? And I don't want them to say that about me.
Chris Hedges, thank you so much. It was a pleasure to talk with you.
Thank you.
Yeah, that last statement that Hedges makes is essentially my position as well. It's like we are living in a society where fascism is taking hold, and it's taking hold in big ways. And capital isn't just going to relinquish control of the system. It's going to do everything it can to maintain control of the system. And like this last week, I've seen articles coming out that are trying to blame the housing crisis on immigrants. Right? You're going to see the corporate media do everything it can to divide us, to keep us split up, so that it can attack us or pit us against one another. And we are getting into a position where we can't afford that. We can't afford that as a species. And these guys are going to walk us off the edge of the cliff. Like, they don't care. Like, it doesn't matter to them at all. Like, these guys, they live in a they're guys like Pinker, right? They live in a fairy tale fantasy world where they think that even if something bad does happen, they'll be protected from it, right? And it's going to take something really dramatic and really, like, seriously evil for these people to even begin acknowledging something needs to be done. And so, like, Chris Hedges is like my spirit animal, right? Like, he's the guy that I always have turned to. I think I've read every single thing he's written. And I highly recommend. I'm glad that I got to play him today. I hope that you guys enjoyed that. Well, enjoyed that. I hope that it fed your spirit, I suppose. I hope that it gave you some solidarity. All right, back to the news. I'm seeing so much. I've been talking about this all day today. So many people are coming out with just like new pictures of nature. Seems like the beautiful weather. People are cooped up. My feed is just absolutely loaded with just wonderful, fuzzy, nice stuff. Netflix adds movies set in New York, but it's obviously Toronto category. Yeah. I see that kind of stuff all the time, dude. There's some movies I watch where it's like supposed to be in Philadelphia or something, but then they do a pan and you can like see the CN Tower. You're like, come on, guys. I hope you guys are all doing well out there. Thanks for you guys who popped in. This is a good opportunity for me to say, make sure if you're not subscribed, please subscribe. Like, share, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. My Patreon's in the description if you want to support this kind of work that we're doing. Yeah. When boomers say, why don't you buy a house? Had a great union job. Unions are ruining the country. Becomes a homeowner at 22. Tells son's generation it's lucky because it can afford $200 smartphones. Has it better than his parents and his kids. When I was in college, my summer job paid the tuition. Tuition was $400. Yeah, I love these. Like, finances boat 3.9%. Makes you borrow tuition money at 8.9%. Yeah, like, I forget, this guy had a name. I think it was like Boomer Steve or something. Hasn't applied for a job since Jimmy Carter. You need to hit the bricks to find work. That's what I did. Oh, yeah. I still, every so often, get people, like, you can tell, they're just these complete out-of-touch boomers who are like, you got to go in and shake his hand, right? You got to go in and shake the guy's hand and really look at him in the eye. And it's like, what are you talking about? You know what they say to me if I go in and try to shake a guy's hand, look him in the eye? They're like, okay, but application's online, right? Fill out this, here, give us your resume, and then put that resume into this form. Upload your resume to our system, and then put all the information that's on the resume into the system. And then our algorithm will determine whether or not you're suitable for the job. If you don't have a university degree, we're probably not even going to look at it. And then we'll weed out a couple of them. And then in the end, what it'll come down to is we'll get 3 people out of this process from 1,000 resumes. And those 3 people then will come in and will shake their hand and pay attention to them. But until that point, get slagged, right? And I still get guys who, I would love. Yeah, and small business was the only place you could do that, I actually do have a kind of a story with that, just with an ice cream shop. I walked in and I saw the sign and I was like, hey, can I work here? I just need a good summer job. And the guy was just like, yeah, sure. He saw me. He saw that I was a big guy, kind of fit. I was in the neighborhood, right? We had a conversation. I came in, scooped ice cream, right? That's your classic boomer job. Only the difference is that instead of scooping ice cream, they were doing heavy manufacturing and shit like that. Yeah, it's exhausting dealing with these kinds of people because they live in the past. They don't actually live in the real world where anything real is happening. Another beautiful shot, right? Tons of these on the stream today. And honestly, I just feel like I need to pay pay homage to them and be like, you know what? This is what people need right now, man. This is what people need right now. They just need a little bit of loveliness. I think we could all use it. Right? Here's a gray tree frog. Yeah, that's exactly it, Kiri. The world they lived in no longer exists. And they can't perceive it. They can't, they've surrounded themselves with sort of the edifice of that world that used to exist, and they can't really come to terms. It's easier, this is how crazy it is. It's easier for them to stop listening to their own children. It's easier for them to disregard what they're being told by their own children than it is to face the reality of what's happening in their society. That's the level of delusion that we're talking about. That's high scale levels of delusion, which makes sense because as Chris Hedges spoke about in this piece, you are talking about people who believe that Jesus is coming back at any moment. You are talking to people who are holding on to this high level delusion about the nature of reality and how things work. And if you're willing to accept into your thought process the idea that there's going to be this rapture and a wizard is going to descend from the sky and righteousness will prevail, and incidentally, I'm one of the good people, of course, and Jesus is going to help me, of course, so it's totally cool that I create a genocide in the Middle East, 2 genocides in the Middle East, as well as steal all the resources, because those are dirty, those are foreigners, those are people in other religions, those are the unrighteous people, right? I'm a boomer, but warned my children about work jobs, etc. They work harder, and we're very lucky to be in the right place at the right time. Yeah, and that's really what it comes everybody I've ever talked to or seen who is in a position of prominence of any sort, sure they worked hard. Sure they worked hard. Absolutely they did. But they also, were in the right place at the right time. And we never talk about how we always focus on the person who got the job, and we never pay any attention whatsoever to the 10 people who didn't, right? Those people just go away, as far as we're concerned. And if you actually pause and focus on those people, yeah, you could see the journey of heartbreak, right? You've got 10 people, one of them actually gets the job that they were trained to do, right, at the wage that they were expecting, right? Maybe 2 others will get a job sort of in the field, but not necessarily the ones they were trained for, right? Another 5 will get a job, but it has nothing to do with what they trained for or their field or anything, right? One person will end up like literally working retail, saddled with this debt, and another person will be on the street. That's the structure. That's how it looks. That's what capitalism does. That's what it generates. And all of those kids, by the way, right, go into that and come out of the schooling, right, with tens of thousands of dollars of debt. Like, the average student debt is something like $60,000, right? Like, and there's no, and we're the first generation that ate that, right? And we turn around and we say to the people who erected that system, this is illegitimate, like, this is total bullshit. And we get told, you just got to work harder like we did. And then we turn and like look at like the system that they lived in, and we're like, no, we're working like 15 times harder than you. Shut up. Like, shut up. Like, I don't, like, anytime I talk to a farmer, I'm literally like, where'd you get your free land from? Right? Oh, that land that your dad gave you, right? Like, you're working on 100 acres of land here, right? Where'd you get that land from? Oh, you got it for free. Oh, interesting. Where did he get it from? Oh, he got it for free. Oh, interesting. Where did he get it from? Oh, he came from Europe and went to get free land that was given from the government. So literally, you can stand in front of me and tell me that government handouts are bad, while you are the primary beneficiary of government handouts. Like, there is no worse person than a rural farmer voting Conservative. There's no worse person in the world today than a rural farmer who is voting Conservative. They are the worst people on the planet. And they grow our food. Like, it's this very weird connection that exists in the minds of these rural conservative types who literally have been given free land that was bestowed upon them by the government, and then turn around and tell us that if you need a government handout, you're lazy. It's like, you're the worst person alive if you're saying that. Like, and it's very difficult for me to take such a position seriously, which is why conservatism is dying, because it's obviously fraudulent. It's obviously fraudulent, right? Like, it's dying, and we know it's dying because the people who are engaged in it are obviously frauds, or illiterate, or stupid, or all of those things. I'm in a grumpy mood, I gotta be honest. Like, I'm pausing looking at these tree frogs and like taking that time, and I'm doing it 100% because I'm like, I'm tired, I'm grumpy, I'm so pissed off at like the Israel situation. I'm so pissed off at like all of this kind of stuff. And I had a nice weekend. Everything was nice, right? I had a nice time. Had a good couple of days off, really refreshed, all that kind of stuff. Got out to the beach, had a lovely time. And now I'm sitting here and I'm like really realizing, like, boy, I'm just like, I'm just super pissed off. I'm like super, super pissed off. I'm super pissed off because of this, because of the Canada Infrastructure Bank. And that nobody is talking about this. I don't like Thought Slime isn't talking about it. The Surfs aren't talking about it. Michael Hudson's not talking about it. I don't hear anybody. I've heard it mentioned one time by one individual, and it was in passing. And it's yeah, of course the police harassed the bike brigade today at a rally for justice, right? Like, of course they did that. That's their job. That's their job. They're supposed to do that. Put those people in their place, right? So minimum wage is up for discussion, but maximum wage is off the table. F this, I'm gonna go live in a haunted grove draped in shroom-dipped skunk pelts. That's just a weird tweet, man. Inflation risk is now the consensus trade. It's priced into equities already. Stocks will likely rally if further data shows inflation is indeed transitory. Yeah, we'll see about that. We'll see about that. We're due for a pretty big stock market crash. We're due. And like, now's about the time. Actually, my daughter did do the job she was trained for, but now works in management for a job she has no clue she would be in. After all the money and time, yeah. Like, we don't, like, there's no system of integration, right? Like, it's just like throwing, we take kids, we jam them into this meat grinder of a system, right? And we say, there are jobs. Like, what's the big one, right? Education. Everybody in my generation was told that there were going to be big education level jobs, right? That all of these educators were going to be retiring. And so we need educators, right? And that's what we were told. Totally fucking false. Totally fucking false. Like, everybody I know who went into education is like really, really staggering around for a job. Like, I think I know one person who actually managed to make it through and get the job. Yeah, kids should not pay for college specific. Like, I mean, the idea that we can pay for 12 years of education, but to get them to specialize and to become citizens of the system, that's a bridge too far. They need to pay in on that. Like, it's just sociopathic. Like, and that's really what it is. And all of the arguments are the typical stupid conservative nonsense. I don't want to pay for somebody else's education. Then you're going to have a society full of stupid people, right? And that's the response to all of their dumb nonsense. Like, I don't want to pay for somebody else's garbage collection. Well, then you'll have garbage all over the place. Well, then we should find those people. Well, so you're willing to actually pay a police officer, a judge, and a lawyer to find somebody, and for like 20% the cost, you just pick up their garbage. Like, do you realize how dumb you sound? And the answer is obviously no. Conservatives don't realize how dumb they sound, or they would stop talking. Yeah, exactly, Kiri. Like, that's exactly right. There are much poorer countries than America or Canada that offer free education, right? Because it's not about, like, our political system is not designed to improve anybody's life. It's not designed to improve anybody's life. This is the thing that's so, like, devastating about the capitalist system, is that it doesn't improve anybody's life, not even the capitalists, right? Because if you're a capitalist, you already have, right? You already have all of this money, and the extra money that you're getting, that you're jamming to offshore accounts, doesn't mean anything. Doesn't improve the quality of your life. Doesn't make anything better for you, right? So it just ends up being this game that everybody's playing, where the people at the very top are measuring their success based on numbers go up in bank, right? And everybody else just has a complete diminishment of the quality of their life. And because of the Canadian Infrastructure Bank built into our system now, that income inequality, that wage gap, that wealth gap that exists in our society, where we're splitting off, where all the wealth is piling up over here and everybody else gets to go slag off, that gets worse because the Canadian Infrastructure Bank borrows money from these guys, from these wealthy guys, instead of taxing at them, right? It borrows the money and then pays it back with interest. So these guys stay wealthy, and it's entrenched into the governing system now. And then, wait a minute, where does the interest to pay them for the pleasure of borrowing the money in the first place, where does that come from? It comes from these guys, right? Comes from these guys who are living like this, right? Living right down here, right? So it increases and it entrenches and it guarantees further disparity in the society. As a matter of course of the functioning of government now, because now we have this Canadian Infrastructure Bank. It's a complete and total disaster. It's a fascist institution, technically even. Like, I'm not saying fascist as like, oh, I don't like this, it's fascist. I'm saying literally according to the very definition of fascism that was given by people like Mussolini, it connects directly. And, like, it's going to make our society, like, we are going to have a major economic collapse. Because what's going to happen is that North American capitalism Like, we're going to come out of the pandemic and it's going to be like, yeah, okay, let's go. Let's ramp up all kind of stuff. And the process of ramping up is just going to collapse the whole thing to the ground because nobody has any money, right? No one has any money. They can't buy anything. They can't do anything. They can't participate in anything. And they've been so thoroughly abandoned by the capitalist class that they're not in a rush to sell themselves to the capitalists for less than a living wage, right? And so, like, people are literally just, like, living in motorhomes, cars, these, like, tiny shelters, tents, right? And that's all going to get way worse. Like, all of that's going to get way worse. We're not going to recover from that. Not without something serious. Yeah. And then add global warming to this absolute shitstorm, which we're ignoring, mainly, right? Trudeau is banning straws, like, disposable plastics. If that had been going on 10 years ago, I would have been like, oh, okay. But the idea that we are just now getting our shit together to ban, like, we need a full-scale war economy, right? We need a full-scale war economy to take this on. Like, this whole, like, oh, let's just fuss with the numbers and put a carbon tax and all. Oh, and then there's the forget that. Forget all of that. We need a full-scale war economy that outright forbids that. Like, why are we still selling Dodge Rams? Like, what kind of ridiculous society do we live in where we're still selling not even banning, not even saying, no, you gotta, like, do a hand in, no, you gotta do any of that kind of stuff, not any of that kind of stuff, simply saying, no, you can't buy any extra of these. Like, that's how stupid we are. And we're very stupid. Like, just incredibly stupid as a people. And like, there are very simple, easy, clean things that we could do today that would not, like, what would the repercussions be? Okay, you know what, like, forbid the sale of vehicles that require a certain amount of gasoline to use. Just forbid it. Just say, no, those are over, right? And then create a phase-out system, a buyback system, right? And then start heavily investing in mass transit. But, and all of these things are necessary, right? And certain societies are already ahead of the game on this. They're already doing it. Like, there's a lot of European nations that are doing it. China is doing it. Russia is doing it, right? And they're going to have all of this transit and all of this, like, high technology stuff that's going to be, like, a generation ahead of what we're doing. And we're still going to be begging the capitalists to loan us the money so that we can build a bridge across a river, right? Like, it's such a fucking dog and pony show. We're literally there are already First Nations. There are First Nations tribes that are reinvesting in stables, that are getting horses into their communities because they're like, yeah, we've got to reclaim these horses. Like, this is going to be the way that we are going to be able to travel, because we've botched our transit and automotive system so completely. And, like, let me be extremely clear. Climate change aside, right? Climate change aside, where the sun comes and burns our crops down and we have mass famine, which is on the cards. Like, that's, you don't even need to be like a prophet to see that. It's really obvious that that's possible. We run out of oil, right? Like, we've already, like, if this is peak oil, we're actually here. Like, we're on the other side of it, right? We are in an oil decline situation. We are going to run out of oil. It is going to happen. And it's going to happen a lot sooner than we think. Because as soon as that commodity starts to hit that point where it's not so freely available for everybody, prices are going to go through the roof. Prices are just going to jack right up. And if we turn around and say to our industries, oh, hey, this fuel that you're still beholden to because we've done nothing to alleviate it, now prices have gone way up. Well, there are places that are going to produce less food, right? Our agricultural system is intrinsically tied to fossil fuel, right? And we're doing nothing to alleviate that. We're doing nothing to change that. And so when the fuel runs out, people will just starve, right? They just will, right? They just will. And are we erecting urban gardening? Are we erecting massive subsidies for people to spend their time gardening and growing food? Like, I literally walked back home from a friend's house today, and every single house had a beautiful, glorious flower garden in the front of their house. Buy flowers, buy flowers. Time to start planting potatoes, right? Time to start planting potatoes. Time to start taking that very, very seriously. And like, that needs to be done on like a massive scale governmental push of saying to people, like, we need to subsidize people who are willing to transfer their farms, their home properties into farms. Like, I walk by a grass patch and I'm just like, that should be that should be a farm, because we can't be doing that in crisis. We need to get prepared for the crisis. We need to be doing that ahead of the crisis, so that as the crisis hits us, we're already ready to go. And we're not doing any of it. We're a bunch of morons literally walking towards a cliff where there's a sign and the arrows are pointing cliff here. There's even a handrail, right? And they're dragging their children to the cliff, and the children are screaming, "Stop walking towards the cliff. What are you doing?" And they're just stomping towards the cliff, and everybody's screaming and pulling them back. And the signs are getting bigger and larger as you get closer and closer, and they're just gonna step over the handrail and go over the cliff. And as they go over the cliff, right, if we can let go of them and abandon them, they'll say something whingy like, "Oh, I'm the victim, you're abandoning me." Like, these clueless, delusional idiots who are going to drop down the edge of this cliff and try to take us with them as they do it, while we're screaming at them to stop. No, we need a full-scale general strike. Like, we need a full-scale general strike. We need people to be, like, parking 100 vehicles at the intersection of the 401 and the 400. Like, we need a massive scale general strike. It's the only thing that they'll respect. It's the only thing they'll listen to, because they're sociopaths. Like, they're not going to listen to reason. They're not going to listen to rationale. They're not going to, like, and in fact, I'm convinced more now than ever that plenty of these guys at the top are getting off on the torture that they're inflicting on people, right? And also the conniving lying about it, right? Plenty of these guys are getting off on the idea that they can murder people at will, that they can commit to genocides, and then turn around and lie to people about it, right? And create like a falsehood in a media sense. I'm very, very convinced that this is the case. And so the only thing they're going to respect, they're not, like, people are up in arms because, oh, they're going to take us off the internet. No, they're going to do all that. No, they're not. They're not going to do any of that, because they don't care what we say, right? They're fine if we go online and post. They're fine if we go, like, take a look at what happened during the Obama administration, right? Nobody got up and protested. There was no, like, action. Nothing was going on. We were all just posting online. Oh, grumble, grumble, post online, right? They're fine with that. They don't care about that at all, right? And in fact, they'll actually join in and try to manipulate the discourse, right? Which is what QAnon is, right? That they will actively work in order to manipulate and change a discourse. As long as you stay online, they don't care, right? You can say what you want. They care what you do. And if you gather everybody up together, yeah, what a nightmare trying to get to the 400 from the 401. Yeah, now imagine it was just jammed up with cars. And just jam them up, right? And we've got to do it. We don't have another option. Like, we don't have, like, what other option do we have? just to sit around and like bow our heads while the sun breaks through and burns this place down? That's what's going to happen. Like, it's very obvious that that's what's going to happen. Like, and this is, I think this is the most frustrating part about this whole thing for me, is that it's obvious. Like, it's obvious what's going to happen. Like, as obvious as what would happen if you lifted a glass bowl above your head and threw it on the ground, right? And but we live in a society where we've got the glass bowl above our head and we throw it, and then when it shatters, everyone's going to go like, what? Who could have expected or anticipated the result of that? Literally everybody. Like, literally anybody who has a brain and eyes in their head. Yeah, it would destroy Toronto. That's the point. Right? Like, it burns down anyway. But this is like my big thing, right? This is like my new slogan for interacting in all of this. Like, it burns down anyway. Like, like, why do we, like, when people during the Black Lives Matter protests went around and smashed up a bunch of property, the delusional denialists lost their minds. And I'm just sitting here being like, what are you crying about? That all burns down anyway, right? Like, are you crying because it's happening early? Is that what you're crying about? Like, this is all burned down anyway. Like, why are you treasuring any? Like, if you actually treasured any of this, you would try to stop climate change from happening. But you don't, right? You don't actually care, obviously, because you're doing nothing to protect yourself and your family and your children. You're doing nothing, right? So it burns down anyway, so they got ahead of it. So what? I don't understand. What's the problem? Chris Hedges talks about buying cheap cars, drive them in the middle of the highway, step out and take the car battery with you as you go. Yep. Straight up. Just like, that's easier to do in America than here in Canada, I think. But like, you could go out to like, I'm sure there's like a place out in Brampton where there's just like some garage somewhere that has like barely working like beaters. If that were done in every major city, Canada would crash for sure. Yeah, the boomers are hoping it happens after they are gone. That's absolutely true, Ruth. That's absolutely true. That's why, like, a lot of Christian conservatives, like, especially the boomer types, they've, like, grabbed on to this fantasy of, like, we're going to go meet Jesus, you know? And, like, I don't want to be insulting to them, like, to people who are doing that, but it does mean that you can't actually discuss what's coming, right? It's just a method for them to completely disconnect from the horror show that they themselves are perpetuating, right? That they can't actually face up to the reality of what their actions, of the consequences of their actions. And so they're just retreating into this mythical belief system that tells them that, oh, Jesus, we'll meet Jesus up in heaven, right? And Jesus will totally be on my side and won't be like, hey, why are you destroying your children? Like, that seems fucked up. Anyway. All right. That was a big, long one. Yeah, they be going down, not up. Yeah. Although the Bible is clear on this, Ruth. Everybody gets to meet God. Everybody does, right? In biblical terms, right? Everybody goes and meets God. God shits on them, right? And most people go to hell. It also says things like the people who make it into heaven, it will be unexpected, right? That the people who thought that you thought would for sure be the people who are ascending to heaven won't be, and the people who you would be like, no, they're just like the dirty poor, right? They will ascend to heaven. So, and that falls back on the like the meek will inherit the earth kind of thinking, right? Anyway, Christianity, what a shit show. I just wish that the leftist churches, or the church, like the churches that exist on the left, had some courage. That's what I wish. Like, the evangelicals are obviously a fascist, heretical movement, right? And the left churches are so weak and simpering and pathetic. Like, to be fair, they're just dealing with the crisis of capitalism, right? They're just trying to keep their doors open amidst this like capitalist crisis. But like, they're not standing up and saying like Jerry Falwell is a fucking crazy lunatic. Like he's not a Pat Robertson. Like these guys are frauds and con men, right? They're not even reading their own books. They're not even reading their own texts. They're illiterate. Like, it's really obvious. Have you ever heard like a priest, like an Anglican priest say what is obviously true? That these guys are obviously grifting people and are frauds? No. Because they don't have any courage. They're cowards. Ooh, Canada has a once-in-a-generation opportunity to be a global battery leader if we act now. I bet you it involves invading Bolivia. I bet that's... Let's see what this article has to say. This comes from Clean Energy Canada. So I have no idea where Clean Energy Canada comes from. For all I know, this is a far-right kook like PragerU thing. Clean Energy Report, stakeholder electric vehicle supply chain. Yeah, General Motors, Lion Energy, the Mining Association of Canada. Good old... What? Respectable industry, right? These guys have never done anything evil. Has the right ingredients. Yup, yup. Build more action. Oh, here we go. Developing a North American battery alliance within the next year to leverage the Canada-U.S. auto market. Got to link up with the United States as much as possible. These fascists are going to collapse their entire society down to the ground. Got to link up with them, eh? These guys, that looks great. The one thing that I don't think you can disagree with Stephen Harper on, reminding everybody Stephen Harper was a better prime minister than Justin Trudeau, is that Stephen Harper took a look at the United States and said, those bitches are going down. And so he created a whole bunch of trade agreements with a whole bunch of different nations because he knew completely the United States is collapsing. No, we should not be linking up with these guys. Creating some kind of alliance with America? No, thank you. No, thank you. Like, tip your hat, be polite, right? All that kind of stuff. But, haha, my money is my money and your money is your money. Okay. We're going to have separate banking accounts. Thanks. Unlocking the potential of Canada's sustainable battery metals, minerals, and material supply. This doesn't this read like something from like a Captain Planet? Unlocking the potential of Canada's sustainable battery metals, minerals, and material supply. Kind of loses it at the end, but at the beginning. Launching a dedicated battery supply chain fund to address challenges and invest in strategic projects. Sure. Promoting Canada's clean and responsible battery brand. Note, clean and responsible battery brand. So it's not that the batteries will actually be clean and responsible. It's that the brand will attempt to convince you that they're clean and responsible. And supporting a robust EV market in North America to ensure there's sufficient demand for batteries and the materials that go into them. Like, and we're not going to make this, it's not going to be a clean transition. Like, that's the thing I think, like, everybody's like, we're going to make a new technology and step into the future, hand in hand with one another, togetherness, right? It's not going to fucking happen. Huge segments of the populace are going to be abandoned. The super hyper rich are going to get a hold of these electric vehicles, right? The amount, I think one of the major benefits, in my view, is that it means that there's going to be like way less vehicles on the road, like just generally. There's just going to be less vehicles on the road generally because nobody's going to be able to afford these things and there's not going to be enough resources and the technology's not going to be in place, right? And the government won't have actually built the infrastructure necessary to make the transition clean, right? It's if we were already in a position where we were like in a war economy and we were actually moving forward, like the Trudeau administration is doing like big deficit spending, but its deficit spending is basically an augmentation of neoliberal capitalism where big deficit spending to take money and give it to a corporation that offshores it or buys their own stock, right? Like, they're not building any of this shit. They're not building any of this shit. Like, they're patting themselves on the back because they're planting a couple of trees and banning straws. Like, fuck these guys. While simultaneously erecting the fascist institution of the Canada Infrastructure Bank. So, like, North America's totally doomed, man. Like, we're fucked. Anyway. Currently, 80% of the world's batteries are produced in Japan, South Korea, and, oh, hey, China. The EU plans to become entirely self-sufficient on EV batteries by 2025. Good luck. Yeah, I mean, like, this is all, like, pie-in-the-sky sort of stuff. The battery recycling industry is set to triple its capacity. And, like, all of this is based on, you guys know me, man, any excuse whatsoever to open up Google Maps. Some of the largest deposits in the world of lithium, Bolivia, right? Remember how Bolivia had that big coup? Right? Fascists literally came in and said, we own this place now, and ousted the democratically elected leader. And as always, it was a CIA-sponsored coup, right? Well, guess what? The socialists are coming back, and they're just like, no, we're not interested. What are, like, the largest lithium deposits? Oh, Chile. There you go. Chile. Doink. Bonk, 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 bonk. That actually is going to posture Chile. Chile just, like, literally cleared out all of their neoliberals. You've got people saying outright, like, Chile is where neoliberalism was born. It's where it will die. And, like, if you were part of the old neoliberal structure, or if you're walking around still talking a neoliberal game in Chile, oh, I see. Sorry, bud. Your name confused me. I thought you were saying no. Chile also has a lot, but your name is Communism No. Communism No. Hi, bud. How you doing? Don't forget to subscribe and do all the liking and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, Chile also has a lot of copper. That's right. And I mean resources generally. Let's dig a little deeper on this. What's this chart trying to tell us? Australia. Look at that. No. China has a bit of lithium. But Chile, look at you, Chile. I thought Bolivia had a ton. Am I wrong about that? I will completely retract if I'm wrong. I thought for sure Bolivia had a bunch. This is a great chart. I really like that chart. Bolivia lithium reserves. Yeah. Yeah, Bolivia, the potential is enormous. So what's this about? Like, why is Bolivia not showing up on this? Come on, Statista. What's up? What's up? Why? Oh, I need a exclusive premium. Okay, we're done. All right. Anyway, so, like, these are the next wars, like Chile, Bolivia, like this. But here's the thing: is that the American empire has gotten so weak, right? Like, so weak that I don't think they can successfully engage any longer here, right? Like, China and Russia, to a certain degree, have done a lot to arm these guys. And, like, you have places like Venezuela where, like, the United States isn't going to crack Venezuela. They're not going to get in there, right? They might embarrass themselves trying. Have you read Open Veins of Latin America? Feel like I may have, like, when I was 19. So that's, like, a long time ago. It's a long fucking time ago. Yeah, it's horrible what we've done there. That's absolutely the truth. Search Afghanistan lithium supply. You got it, bud. Afghanistan lithium supply. When did that happen? When did this article come from? Well, that's from way back. 2010. 10 years ago. Yeah, man, they're never ever gonna leave Afghanistan. This idea that they're like, oh yeah, we'll leave. No, that's dumb. They're never ever gonna leave that region. Like, they're just gonna steal as much resources as they can. Maybe he figured Chile and Bolivia was the same area. Yeah. It's why America is sending heavy lifting equipment to Afghanistan and refuse to leave. Yeah. And as much as Joe Biden says that they're leaving that area, maybe they will withdraw like actual American troops, so they can say like, yep, we left Afghanistan. But they're funding mercenary groups all through Afghanistan. Are you kidding me? Like, the United States is really, really good, and its citizens are really, really stupid at understanding how to fight proxy wars, right? Like, Americans can understand that, well, when Russia was invading Afghanistan and trying to get into Afghanistan, we fought a proxy war by selling weapons to the Afghanistans, and then that deflected the Russians and led to the loss of this war. But Americans can't seem to process or understand that, like, we could just hire mercenaries and privatize the Afghanistan war, which is 100% what they're doing, right? And what you'll end up with is corporations, each with their own private military, vying for power and control in Afghanistan under the auspice of the American empire, who at any moment could swoop in and sweep everything away, right? And again, like, the resource advantage that they, poppy plants for opioids, very, very true, dude. Like, the heroin industry that's been propped up by the CIA, very important industry for the CIA. It is actually how the CIA funds many of its operations, is by funneling heroin into the United States. And I mean, I know I just said that as if it's like, and you're supposed to be like, oh, okay, that's a normal thing. Fucking totally true. You can Google that shit. It's easy to find. And also then on top of it, you've got the resources in the region, right? The lithium and the copper and all the oil that definitely exists. But then on top of that, like, strategically, they're never going to give up Afghanistan. Like, this little thing, this funnels right into China. They can literally send terror groups, and have sent terror groups, into China. And look, oh, it's Xinjiang. Sound familiar? Sound familiar? Does this region of China sound familiar? Oh, that's where the Uyghur genocide is happening. Oh, interesting. Interesting. So you're telling me the Americans can and have funneled terrorists who they train to come in order to mess with, and this is also where the beginning of the Belt and Road Initiative begins, right? So they funnel terrorists into this, into China, so that they can go attack the Belt and Road Initiative, attack crucial infrastructure in China, and then when China is forced to erect defensive measures, such as cameras, right, security checkpoints, all of this, they can pretend it's just because China is this outrageous authoritarian place, instead of actually talking about literally how the Americans funnel terrorists into Xinjiang in order to disrupt. So it's a proxy war. It's like the definition of a proxy war, and we seem to be completely illiterate of it. And like, we just don't seem to understand that that's at all happening. And then there's also the relationship between Afghanistan and Pakistan. Pakistan is a nuclear force, right? And the Americans are just like, yeah, like, if Islamabad decides to go red, start firing missiles up, maybe we can get some troops in there, right? Just like, boom, pop them over from Kabul. They're not going to relinquish that. They're not going to say no. Like, they're not going to suddenly be like, oh, well, we'll just leave. And hey, oh, look, Afghanistan. Oh, look, who's this? Who's this right here? So, like, they can get into Iran at any time. They can get into Pakistan at any time. They can get into China, right? And then on top of that, all the resources, all of that kind of stuff. Do not bullshit yourself. Afghanistan might as well be an American territory. They're never going to let it go. They will let go of New Mexico. They will just abandon New Mexico before they abandon Afghanistan, right? They what else? What's a place that nobody would give a shit about in America if you were one of these sociopaths? North Dakota, right? Minnesota. They'll just fucking let those go. Who cares? Well, they've already abandoned Michigan, right? They've already abandoned Michigan completely, right? Like, what makes you think that? So they'll abandon Michigan, but they will never ever let go of Afghanistan, right? Too many people. Alaska, lots of oil in Alaska still. Don't want to let go of Alaska quite yet, right? Lots of oil still. Hawaii, Florida. I did it. I found the one that everybody in America would just be like, yeah, that's fine. You could just cut it right here, just float it off into the sea. Florida, yeah. Give it another 30 years. Florida will just be underwater anyway. Like, it's all low-lying territory to begin with, right? That's true too, actually. Like, given its positioning, right? Like, they for sure. Like, Wales has to be a military base, right? Like, the very fact that we're not getting, oh, it's an Indian reservation, my bad, shows what I know. I'm the derp. But there's got to be a military base around here. I could probably figure it out, but I don't really care to, honestly. Bering Land Bridge National Preserve. Well, I think that'd be kind of nice to go there. What was the name of that lady who came from Alaska? She got made fun of. I can see Russia from my house. Who's that lady? I can't remember her name. Alaska. Vice President. Sarah Palin. Who, incidentally, I think is like an abhorrent political figure, but is a total fox. Like, she's a complete and total babe. Hey, Wigwith, how you doing? She's totally a babe, right? Like, I'm not wrong about that, right? Like, somebody's got to... I know, Ruth, you're in the chat and you're being like, this shit again. And, but, like, she... And this is the thing that's actually really interesting about Sarah Palin, is that she's a little bit cleverer than I think people thought. And I knew that she would... Yeah, of course she's crazy. Like, yeah, obviously she's nuts. But she... you'll notice how she kind of disappeared from the discourse once she spoke out for Assange, right? She spoke out for Assange and she's gone. She's completely gone. And... but here's something that she did, right? So she was the vice presidential candidate with McCain, right? Their failed bid. They didn't succeed. Fine. And so the next cycle, when the campaign was going on, when the primary campaign was going on, she got a bus and like had her face on it and like the Constitution and all this kind of stuff, and was following the convention around to go from site to site, but she never actually declared her candidacy. And so people who would see this big ass van and see her coming, and she would like stage talks separate from the convention, right? Separate from the primaries. And so people would see her, understand that she's like the former vice president, and donate money to her. And the numbers are something like she raised like something like $2 million doing this, but she never declared her candidacy, right? She never declared it. So all of this money that she was just given, she didn't have to abide by any rules. She didn't have to declare for anything. She didn't need to do any of that kind of stuff. People gave her $2 million just for showing up. So it's a scam. And she knew she was scamming them. And she did it anyway. She went out there in America and freedom, democracy. Give me your money. Give me your money. And they did. And so she just like walked away with it. It was brilliant. It's brilliant. Good couple months worked by Sarah Palin. It just goes to show you how gullible these fucking guys are, right? Like, just like Get a big van, slap your face on it. I think her and her family just latched onto reality TV. Yeah. Yeah, with her family representing some peak hypocrisy. No, it was really, really clear from the beginning. From, like, the outset of Sarah Palin's career that she was in it for the notoriety and the grift, right? And she was such a cynical choice. She was, like, the most cynical choice that they could have picked. Just like this unknown, I'm from Alaska, right? Like, she didn't really have any backing. She didn't really have anything going on. And that's why Republicans are always so peeved off and feel like they're being robbed. Because they're crazy? No, yeah, you're right. It's because they're gullible, right? And they are gullible. They're incredibly gullible. And so if you're that gullible and you just keep falling for stupid tricks all the time, yeah, of course you're going to be, That's my impression of every Republican I've ever met. Jeez Louise. Commemorating French Canada history in stained glass. Well, let's take a moment, you guys. Let's take a moment. It's really... Okay, I don't care about your stupid story. You said, oh my goodness, it's one of these things. You ever click on a link, you're looking for like a cookie recipe, right? You click on the cookie recipe link, and you know it's going to be like 4 or 5 ingredients. You just need to, and you might even know what the ingredients are. You literally just need the proportions. And it begins with, I visited the Notre Dame Basilica in Old Montreal for the first time in 2018. And you're like, shut up! I don't care! I don't care about your dumb story, I need a cookie! Give me the, and then you scroll down, and as you're scrolling down, it's like pop-ups are coming up. And like capitalism is just like in your face being like, click here, do all this kind of stuff. And then you finally get to the thing, and it is literally like, there it is. And you're like, oh. If I click here, is this actually gonna... This is this huge long thing. Okay, if I were invested, I'd see some pretty sweet stuff here, I think.
The indigenous people...
Like, this is pretty sweet. I'm going to turn the sound off. I don't care. This looks pretty sweet, though. Like, imagine, like, the craftsmanship of this. And like, how much effort went into this kind of thing. You know what I really love to think about? I love to think about, ancient Greeks and Romans. Like, when we think about them, like, doing these statues, right? We think about them, like, having a chisel and a hammer and being like, ting, 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 ting. And that's how we think about it. But no, they figured out a way to mass produce this stuff. That they, so you'd have, like, a bust of a head, right? And they would mass produce this stuff by having a machine, basically. I mean, it had to be hand operated, but a contraption, if you will. And the contraption would run over the already created bust that existed. And while it ran over it, it would actively be chiseling a stone. So it would, you didn't have to, like, re-chisel it. The contraption did it for you while you just sort of ran it over the existing feature. And because of this, they could actually miniaturize the busts, right? Because you run it over and then you just miniaturize the thing. And so they could create a very, very tiny things. So if you go to Toronto, is it the ROM? Is it the ROM or is it the AGO? I think it's the AGO. Yeah, they have this huge section where there's all of this miniaturized, like literally a sculpture of Da Vinci's Last Supper that's this big, right? Literally out of marble. And you're like, how did they do that? Well, they did that because they actually made a big one at one point, right? And then they took this contraption and like ran it over the big sculpture that they had done that miniaturized it. And it's actually really flippin' cool. worth a watch, worth a look if you can get to the AGO. Recently looked up how to make a flax egg, which is 1 tablespoon flax, 2.5 tablespoon water. That's it. It had a full exactly. You'd think that at this point YouTube would just be like, cookie recipe, boom. Nope. Like literally like, oh, you need to know how to make a flax egg? When I was a young child living in Toronto, my mother would make me flax eggs. They remind me of a simpler time. And you're just like, shut up! I don't care at all! Just stand with the Foxhog! Oh wow, went to Duomo Cathedral in Milano. Good, lucky for you, Ruth. What a beautiful experience that must have been. Yeah, you're right about that. Those old cathedrals, those European cathedrals, those guys were doing something else, man. Like, those guys were, like, embarking on, like, they were, sure there was sort of this megalomaniacal kind of aspect to it, of like, and I'll be the one that did it. But I do think that a lot of people were involved in those projects as a manifestation of their spirit, right? As a manifestation of the spirituality that they perceived in their own faith and in their own structures, right? Like, like, you take a look at what we've built, right? And our structures are like these big mega churches that are made out of, like, wood paneling and, like, linoleum. They look shitty. They're like made out of, like, aluminum siding with, like, a big stupid cross that's neon, you know? Like, our structures are so dumb, and they're gonna look worse over time. Like, these old cathedrals, they seem to only get better over time. Like, the copper roofing has gone green, sure, but, like, the stone, it's weathering and all that kind of stuff, but it just looks like, it just gives it gravitas. It just looks like it's like, oh, this is important. We know it's important. And those buildings are going to be there for like another 1,000 years, and then some, as long as we don't nuke the place. Meanwhile, these super churches that we've built, these frauds and con men have built, will have like fallen over and blown off into the wind. Or they'll be used for like hay storage or something. Like requisitioned by farmers. They'll leave their cows in there. Anyway. I am so happy that I just outright admitted that I'm in a shitty mood. The second I admitted I was in a shitty mood, I feel like I just, like, things connected for me. You guys are great. Thanks for listening to my crap. How many of you are actually in here right now? 10. Bless every single one of you. Be sure to like, share, subscribe. Donate in the Patreon. Come on, you can do it. I feel like such an asshole every time I do that on the stream. Ugh. That's the job. 75% of the world's mining companies are based in Canada. Yeah. Like, because we're probably, like, we're giving them a big fucking tax break, I bet. Like, a lot of them are really, really irresponsible. Yeah, no kidding. No shit. Oh, you mean people who are, like, literally strip mining? Oh, no shit. While working on a piece I wrote last month about a Canadian gold mine being shut down by protesters in Kyrgyzstan, I came across a statistic that I thought must have been a mistake. With all the noise and criticism, it seemed shockingly underreported that 75% of the world's mining companies are headquartered in Canada. Honesty always makes me feel better. Yeah, that's right, Jeff. And I know that you guys are down to hear me say some things honestly. I mean, I think you wouldn't be here if you weren't tolerating that. Here we go. Why? What makes Canada's don't-own organizations? Yup. I asked Jamie Kneen. How's that for a name? Kneen? Just Kneen? Kneen? I bet that K is silent. A non-profit organization. Yup. Just why is it? There's two sides to it. One, a concentration of expertise. Okay, so like we're sweet. Great. The other side is that Canada provides very favorable conditions. The listing requirements are pretty lax. The disclosure requirements are pretty lax. You don't have to have Canadian directories or Canadian shareholders to be a Canadian company. So it's the globalism grift, right? Really pretty straightforward. We've just made things so sweet for these guys that they can come in, and we've probably given them like a ton of loopholes. They can declare their mining stuff here, and we're just like, that's totally fine. There are really only two Canadian laws that apply internationally. One is against having sex with children. So, pretty nuanced stuff here. The other is against bribery and corruption. The RCMP has told us there's absolutely no way they can control that at all. So literally, the only requirements that we're placing on these mining companies is do not have sex with children, which is odd that you have to, like, explicitly state. Don't you think that's a bit odd that you have to explicitly state that to these mining companies? Do not have sex with children, right? And no bribery and corruption, although we can't do anything about it if you do. Oh my God. That's why the world loves Canada. I'm going to hold on to this article. I might do a video about this article. Although a Patreon sent me some information and asked me to do a video, so I'll do that first. And then maybe I'll do this, unless something else takes my imagination. We'll see. Every so often I do get a little like, oh, I don't really know what I want to talk about today. And I forget that there's like 100 billion things to talk about. There's like 100 billion things to talk about. That's why I'm doing this live stream, because there's always something to talk about. When some of your friends either died in combat, committed atrocities, then suicide, can't sleep from nightmares, or can't even listen to fireworks on our day of freedom, and you're listening to endless Memorial Day ads for discounted couches and coolers. Capitalism, baby. Oy vey. Like, it's the commodification of all things, right? Like, commodify, there's nothing sacred, there's nothing holy, right? Like, literally, like, the most holy Christian day, Christmas, right? It has nothing to do with Christianity. It's completely a capitalist holiday, right? That the capitalists will just slip on the priest skin and put on the little thing, wear the little cross, if they can sell you something, right? But if everybody just stopped celebrating Christmas as a Christian holiday, they would just slip that skin off and put on whatever other skin, right? Because that's what they are. They're shapeshifters, right? They're demons. They're evil. They're shapeshifters. Not literally. I mean, they're literally evil, but they're not literally shapeshifters. But, like, that's what they do, right? And honestly, it's going to get to the point where there's going to be such a strong anti-capitalist swell that the capitalists will start putting anti-capitalist slogans on the shit they're trying to sell you, right? It's going to be so, like, overt and grotesque, and plenty of people are just going to be like, this is great, drink the smoothie, right? Fuck. This guy here, I'm bothered by how much news. I really like this guy. He follows me, I follow him, so I'll help promote him for sure. What's bothering me today?
Here's what's bothering me today.
The only thing that bothers me, you know what really bothers me about this guy? The only thing that bothers me about this guy is that he has more subscribers than I do. This guy. I don't know. And he's doing essentially the same shtick I'm doing, right? He comes out with like a 10, 15-minute video a day. I think when I started doing it, he already had 1,000 subscribers. I think that's what it was. And so I'm always like, this guy. There's like a little part of me that's like that. I've made peace with it though, and I'm just like, this guy's great. This guy's great. He's well informed. He knows what's up. He's and I really appreciate how he's more acute on sort of larger, I think, historical and cultural events on the day than I am. I think I know that I'm better than this guy economically, like that I'm on this sort of economic side, but I sort of have this kind of like vision in my brain that we could do some kind of show together where he'd have like a historical analysis and I have the more economic kind of side. Anyway, dreams exist in the dream space. I'm just talking. But hey, dude, if you ever see this and you see that I'm saying this about you, we should collaborate. I have no idea how to get a hold of this guy and say this to him. Anyway, The squad lets Democrats expand the police surveillance state. Yeah, of course. I'm less critical of the squad than some people, because ultimately, like, they even if they were well intentioned, even if they wanted to change things in this kind of way, like, they don't have the numbers. They don't have the numbers advantage. And if they go in and start scorch earthing, right, then it's like a losing strategy. They just need to keep steadily moving in the direction that they're moving, and eventually there will come a point where they will have the numbers advantage. And if they fuck us then, well, what can you do? Message him on Twitter. That's a great idea, dude. You know what? I'm going to straight up... I'm like on a high right now because I hit 500 subscribers. Twitter.com, bothered boy. I love this branding, dude. I love that branding. Bothered boy. Wow. That's perfection. That's perfection. Okay. According to a recent study from Oxford Economics, very serious economics department that hasn't been lying to us for 40 years, on affordable housing in North America, Toronto was ranked the second least affordable, Hamilton was the third, and Ottawa was ranked the sixth. They are all less affordable than New York City. Who's beating us? I want to know. Who's the number one? Another Canadian city. Vancouver. Brilliant. Yeah. Like, people who don't think... Like, people who trick themselves into thinking that we are a more socialist country than the United States are fooling themselves. Like, we have a single-payer healthcare system, right? That, in that regard, we are ahead of the United States, but that's about it, right? Like, as we've seen, we're essentially just a mining conglomeration that, and like, we used to have an actual affordable housing system in this country. You can go back and look at the data. Like, we had like 10 times the amount of affordable housing that we do now. We just privatized it all. We just said, you landlords, you can take it over, right? Because economics. And it just completely fails. Look at this. Homes in Canada are 34% more expensive than the medium income household could afford. Like, the system collapses, right? Like, it's really obvious that it's in free fall collapse. And like, we're not doing anything to alleviate it. We're not doing anything to seriously address it. Like, even Jagmeet Singh, who has come out with the most serious proposals about how to address it, it's not even close to enough, right? Like, I am to a point where like we should be saying to these skyscraper places, these places that have like 200 plus units, no, you have to have 30% needs to be affordable housing, right? And if they start whinging about it, we'll just say, no, then fuck off. We'll just take it over, right? Like, I'm just so disinterested. Why are we negotiating with these capitalists anymore, right? All the jokes that we would say about, ha ha ha, New York City is so unaffordable. Well, fucking look at Toronto. Like, I just don't know, like, what's it gonna take? Like, what's it actually gonna take? Yeah, here's a real church. Look at this. This beauty. And this thing will be standing forever, man. Like, it's until we blow it up, obviously, but... Ah, get out of there. Lilac and a butterfly. What a beautiful shot. That's a beautiful shot. Joe Biden and Kamala the cop made sure an end to qualified immunity wasn't included in the George Floyd bill because they don't want average citizens to be able to sue police officers who beat the hell out of them for no reason at all. Exceeding expectations. I mean, let's be clear. Joe Biden is exceeding expectations because the expectation was nothing, right? So by him doing literally anything, which he's done. He's done literally anything. He's exceeded expectations. I'm in DC today, just saw a group of girls in the Potomac rowing outside the sunshine, all of them with masks on, just totally insane. Imagine how we feel when we go to Subway and see this. Yeah, exactly, right? Like, what the hell is this even? It's kind of open carry shit. I'm just like, what? Like, do Americans not realize that the very act of seeing open weaponry like this is itself a form of terrorism? Like, do people not understand that, like, if you're standing around a guy who has a weapon, especially like this kind of weapon, and he's just standing around, walking around, flaunting it, that by itself is an act of terror? Do we not get that? Yeah, and you know what, Ruth? It's true. It is true. I am also still glad he was elected and not Trump, if only to kind of give everybody a little breath to say, okay, America can be reasoned with. There is like a rational force that exists in America. Yeah, no, they are patriots, not terrorists. But like, that's, to me, that's not better. Right? Like, that's not better, Ruth. Like, that's just like a whole other degree of delusion, right? That on the one hand you have people who are like terrorized by this, and on the other hand you have people who are proud of the terror. Like, woof. That's oh. Ah, what a beaut. Thomas Fuller looks like Ontario's getting caught in a Thomas Fuller thing. Post office in Smith Falls. Wow, that's a post office. That's a beautiful building. That's a beautiful building. Beautiful shot of it, too. Yeah, in their minds. That's right, Ruth. I knew what you meant. I knew what you meant. It's just terrifying. Endorsing the progressive moment of Capitol's tremors as opposed to the regressive moment is okay. Too much to unpack. I only have 4 minutes left on the stream. A fitting fate. 5 Oregon counties back a plan to secede. When American balkanizes, Texans, it's time to text. It's time to text it. Yeah. I mean, this is kind of talking about what Chris Hedges was talking about earlier, right? Like, it's pretty unlikely that the American empire is going to be able to keep itself together. That it's more likely, historically, it's more likely that states will begin to say, like, and there are states that are giving way more than they're getting, and there are a lot of citizens who are starting to stand up being like, and the money that we're giving is being used to destroy Palestinians and Yemenis and invade the Middle East? No, I'm not interested in that. Like, I'm not why are we engaged in that at all? And there's lots and lots of people as we move forward who like America is poised to break up, and the idea that it can't or it won't, I mean, that's not very realistic at all. Like, it's far more likely that America will defederate, right? That the federal, this is what happened to the Roman Empire, right? Just eventually the federation of the Roman Empire that was there to administer the empire, it couldn't maintain itself, and so it all broke up, right? And it's likely that will happen. All right, guys. I hope you are doing all well out there. Let's see if I don't want excessive wealth to buy a gold-plated toilet seat, Karen. I just wish I wasn't crying because I can't afford both spaghetti and rent after working 40 hours a week. Yeah. Well, on that note, you guys, thanks for coming in. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. I know you're doing well out there. I really know you are. I'm glad that you guys pop in. I'm glad that we can share this time together to find ourselves in solidarity and to vent our anger and our frustrations. And I hope you guys know that I really, really do value when you participate in the chat. I really do value when you're here. If you guys have any suggestions for things you'd like to see on the chat, please be sure to share, especially those of you who are in the Discord, the Patreons. Be sure to, anything you put in there, I'm happy to share, I'm happy to send around. Yeah, keep up the good work, keep doing you. I know you're doing well, and I know you're working hard and doing well. And Ruth, you're gonna get that vaccine soon. It's coming. I promise you. All right, good luck. We're gonna need it.